Well, good afternoon, everybody.
On behalf of disabled flying charity Airability, welcome to London Biggin Hill Airport and the Armchair Airshow.
My name is Mike Miller-Smith.
And my name is Shona Bowman.
It's our absolute privilege to bring the thrill of aviation into your homes and gardens today. Please do enjoy our reimagining of the airshow experience.
We're also looking forward to demonstrating and celebrating how the magic of flight can genuinely change lives.
Literally hundreds of volunteers and organisations have made today's show possible. But in particular, I would like to thank our main show sponsors, Aerobites, and of course the London Biggin Hill Airport.
So without further ado, let's roll the titles.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Aerability's 2021 Armchair Airshow, coming to you live today from Hangar 2 at London Biggin Hill Airport. And you can see we're surrounded by the most wonderful aircraft, and we have got one amazing show for you. You can see I'm also joined by three actually, presenters, because my name's George Bacon, alongside me John Windover, Liz McConaughey and Mike Ling. And in many ways this is a very, very special occasion for us, because we all have local connections with Biggin Hill as well. I just happen to have been born just a few miles down the road, opposite the old London Croydon Airport, and Biggin Hill was the very first air show that I attended. But alongside me, John Wendover. John, welcome to you. You've got local roots too.
I do, George, yes, absolutely. So I'm a Bromley boy, and I went to the airfairs when I was a young lad. I learnt to fly here. I've been flying here for 25 years. You know, and Biggin Hill has such a heritage with air displays. You know, the Empire Flying Days, the Battle of Britain at Home Days, and of course the airfairs, and most recently the Festival of Flights. But we are groundbreaking once again, the first virtual air show.
Absolutely, and the effervescent champion of Airability, and we're going to hear so much more about the charity later in the show. But alongside me, you all know that the no air show is complete without the red arrows. And to tell us all about that, a warm welcome to Mike Ling.
We're going to start today's air show with a 9-ship display team who fly vintage aeroplanes, and they wear red flying suits. But it's not the red arrows. Now I'm joined by two pilots from the Canadian Forces Snowbirds. We've got Snowbird 6, Captain Stephen Sparks, and Snowbird 7, Major Brett Parker. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining the Armchair Airshow. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Yep, great. Thanks for having us, for sure.
We've got a bit of a time difference going on here, because you guys, I believe, are on Vancouver Island. Can you explain where you are just now?
Yeah, so we're at CFB Comox, so Canadian Forces Base Comox, which is our primary Western base that we have our Aurora aircraft, which is our maritime surveillance airplane, but we also have search and rescue out here as well.
Could we talk a little bit about the aircraft that you fly? Can you just describe, Steve, maybe what aircraft you're flying now in the Snowbirds?
Yeah, so we've got a side-by-side CT-114 Tudor. Obviously, it was made in Canada in the 60s, and we've been flying it for the airshow team for 50 years now. So it's a cool aircraft in the fact that you can fly it from either seat. And so that helps us in our formation, because the guys who are on the right side of the formation will be sitting in the left-hand seat, so that they've got a better perspective of the center of that formation, and vice versa on the other side. So that's a great single-engine jet. Gives us a lot of ability to stay close to the crowd, because we can fly in tighter formations and keep things at slower speeds. So we keep our show kind of centered over the crowd as much as possible.
We've got some footage here that you guys have kindly put together for us. If you can start talking us through, Steve, can we start with you to talk what's happening through here?
Yeah, so you're getting a perspective from the 7 jet here, but as you can see at the back of the formation, the two outer pilots, 6 and 7, moved from the outside to the inside as the rest of the players kind of moved up towards the boss. So the change happens just as we enter the loop, and you'll see it a little bit on this one as well. The idea is to create those changes on the front side or the back side of loops, so the crowd gets to see that kind of action going on with our smoke lines. It creates a bit of presentation there.
It's just stunning. And that camera footage, that's tank cam, isn't it, I think, which is the facing rearwards from the leader's airplane.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely stunning. So this is taken from your cockpit, Brett, check?
Yeah, so I had the chance to actually take up our public affairs officer. You can see his helmet there. So he came up with me with a GoPro 360 camera to try and take some footage. We, as much as possible, try and use, I mean, obviously the technology has come a long way, even though, you know, some things when it comes to using cameras and whatnot, but, you know, the HD cameras allow you to really kind of hone in on the error analysis, which, you know, having spent the time with the Reds, they pretty much do a very similar process, right? It's you go out there and hopefully the crowd, you put a smile on a lot of people's faces, and then you head to the debrief, and then all the nitpicking comes out and tight there, stretch there, et cetera, et cetera. But that's, you know, that's part of the professional nature of the job, as you well know. So.
Absolutely. This amazes me now. Now I'm very impressed with the Snowbirds flying line abreast. Just talk us through what's happening here. I guess we'll go back to Steve.
It's called an LA combo. So we're going up into a roll here, and as we exit that roll on the bottom side, we continue up into another loop. From the perspective of the outers on the outside here, it's pretty challenging at times to keep that roll and keep the depth throughout. It can get it's a challenging training season leading up to it for sure.
Now this
here you're
one
seeing
I love. Brett, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, as you well know, that some of the magic that happens in the skies is all about trying to fool the crowd and making it look like things are happening closer than they really are. But at the end of the day, it's meant to be a crowd pleaser. So called the lag back cross. Hopefully, when we run in and the announcing happens, we've already built in the depth there. So it looks like all 5 airplanes are going to basically hit each other, as we call the split. And then, of course, you get the oohs and the ahs, and you go, yes, mission accomplished.
And that's
here you see the mirror roll.
So this is so part of our season is basically on a dedication to Captain Jen Casey, who tragically lost her life in the Kamloops crash last year. So she was a very huge Star Wars fan, and this is a formation that we relabeled it, call it the Vader loop, and it's also set to some Star Wars music as you know, kind of a theme for Jen. And so far, it seems like the feedback that we've been getting from that has been, you know, extremely well received, and so we're really happy about that, to be able to, you know, to have a portion of the show season for sure dedicated to the work that she provided to the squadron and also the Canadian Forces. So yeah, so it's fun that we have the ability to be able to do that, unlike the American teams where they typically have a show sequence and that's the name of it. So we were able to relabel a formation that we've, you know, kind of in dedication to her, which is great. So yeah,
that's a lovely touch. And what's happening here? Is this closing the show?
Yeah, this is kind of the end of the show. One of the options that we have this year is the Big Vic loop. It hasn't been done for a few years, but it kind of spreads out the whole formation, shows that to a wide smoke line. And you've got another one of the options coming in here with the split. And again, just presenting to that crowd that kind of finale, so that there being the maple split.
That is brilliant and incredible footage. We're very lucky to have been sent that exclusive in-cockpit footage, which was very well received. Thank you to your public affairs officer for giving us that footage. In fact, going flying with you to get the footage. I'm sure that was a real pain for him sitting in the cockpit to go and film it. But thank you very much, guys, for that.
Well, thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, yeah, for having us, and hopefully we'll be able to get together and have the teams get together. Guys come over again. I know they just came over a couple of years ago, so another trip out west would be awesome to get together again.
Just watching that film there, Snowbirds, reminds me of the time I flew across the Moose Jaw. I was based about 1,000 miles to the west of that, and the scenery didn't change. And there's another 1,000 miles after that where the scenery doesn't change again. It's an extraordinary place, but perfect for flying training.
That was great. I worked with the Snowbirds a number of years ago. In fact, I was very lucky. I got to fly with them over in Quebec. So I flew in the Snowbirds display. Brilliant team to work with. And it's great to be back in my hometown. This is where it all started for me. 1 year old coming to my first airfare here. And then when I was about 3, watching the Red Arrows, telling my mother, I want to be a Red Arrows pilot.
Yeah, well, OK, it's all getting a bit incestuous already, isn't it? So let's get on with the action then. And to kick off, we're going back to the Cold War years. And to tell us all about that, John, over to you.
Yes, thanks very much, George. Well, yes, we are going to see a Cold War warrior. Now, the English Electric Lightning really was an iconic British machine. I caught up with somebody who was very lucky to ever go in one. Here's what he had to say. Well, welcome everybody to the Airspace hangar here at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford in Cambridgeshire, a place I'm sure many of you know or have been to. I'm stood in front of the mighty English Electric Lightning F1 and I'm joined by Wing Commander Phil McGann. Phil, welcome to the Armchair Airshow.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
Now, I understand you've got a pretty close association with this aircraft. Tell us about that.
Well, yes. Back in 1975, when I joined the Royal Air Force, I was going to start pilot training, but I had to go on a holding unit for a while. And I was very fortunate to be sent to RAF Gütersloh in Germany. And I was attached to 19 Squadron, who were flying Lightnings over there. And while I was there, I had the great opportunity to go flying with them in their two-seat Lightning. And I was a 19-year-old, newly commissioned RAF officer. The only RAF aircraft I'd flown in before that was as an air training corps cadet, and it was a Chipmunk. And so here I am, faced with, as you say, a Mach 2 supersonic fighter. And as a 19-year-old, I was given the opportunity to go flying in it. The thing I can really picture and well remember is the sitting at the end of the runway. We'd obviously gone through all the checks, the safety checks and the pre-takeoff checks, and we're sitting at the end of the runway, and he plugs in reheat. And it was like being kicked in the middle of the back. And suddenly we're accelerating at a huge rate down this runway. Just awesome, absolutely awesome.
Now, this aircraft also has a story associated with it, doesn't it, with a certain engineer?
There is a bit of a story with this one. Basically what happened was, as the aircraft was accelerating for takeoff, all the electric cut out, which was not good. And they'd spent a long time trying to work out what the problem was, stripped out various electrical bits and pieces, and they were getting quite frustrated. The officer commanding the maintenance at the time was an engineer, Royal Air Force engineer, Wing Commander Taff Holden. Now, although he was an engineer, he actually was a pilot as well. He'd actually been taught to fly with the RAF. But his experience was very much on Chipmunks and Harvards, that kind of thing. He'd never actually flown a Lightning. And so Taff set off on a short piece of disused runway at Lynham, pushed the throttles forward to start his next test run, and inadvertently pushed the throttles to reheat. And the engines burst into full power. He couldn't get the throttles out of reheat. It's a design feature of the throttles. They go through a gate and they lock. And so he did the only thing he possibly could. He pulled back on the stick and took off in the Lightning. And so he found himself in the circuit over Lynham in this aeroplane with no helmet, no canopy, no radio, the undercarriage locked down, the ejection seat made safe so he couldn't use it. And he had to call on his flying experience to try and bring the aircraft back down again. He made 3 approaches, each time learning more and more about how to handle the Lightning as he brought it into land. And eventually he put the Lightning down on the runway. And he just simply stood on the brakes, stood on the brakes, stood on the brakes, stood on the brakes, and eventually came to a halt about 10 feet from the end of the runway.
Phil, it's been a real treat listening to your stories about the Lightning. Clearly you've had some experiences that any one of us would have given our right arms for. So thank you for joining us on the Armchair Air Show.
Yeah, it's been my great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and your audience. I've been a volunteer here at Duxford for about 4.5 years now. I love talking about our exhibit to our visitors, and just adds to the privilege of flying in the Lightning as well.
You're rubbing it in now, aren't you? Thanks, Phil.
Cheers.
Well, thank you very much to Ian Campbell at Planes TV for that video, and also, of course, to the Imperial War Museum for giving us an insight into that iconic Cold War warrior. Okay, well, what we're going to turn to now is the essence of what Airability does. It's putting people into the cockpit, regardless of their conditions or disabilities. And, of course, Airability is unique in that we have the equipment and also the services and the individuals who can enable this to take place. We will take anybody flying in an aircraft as best we can, regardless of the disability. And of course, Airability also has services on the ground as well. We have the aviation education program for young children, but really we want to get as many people up in the air as possible. And today, there is a lady who has come to Biggin Hill. She's a regular Airability flyer. Her name is Sophie Riley. She's registered blind and a wheelchair user. And she is going to go for a lovely flight this afternoon across the countryside over Kent with Steve Brad, one of our instructors. And you can see here in the footage how we get wheelchair users into an aeroplane. So we have people who are trained to use hoists and very carefully and safely lift people into the cockpit. So that really is that first step to freedom. They then get into the aeroplane, and that's where the magic really begins. And we do say at Airability, if I can fly an aeroplane, what else can I do? It really does lift people up and make them realize that disability should not be a limitation, and it really allows them to figure out that actually, you know what, there's no barriers in life. We can challenge perceptions and break down barriers and do anything we wish. So we'll come back to Sophie later. We'll ask her how that flight went. It's the first time in 14 months she's been flying. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you back to George.
Well, that's very kind, John. And it's truly an inspirational charity. I was hooked the moment that I was invited to come along and help with them. And there are a couple of ways that we want you to help us keep this charity going through the next decades as well. First up, we've got the auction site, and there's some memorable and really exciting things on it, including the things in front of us. Su-27 model here, signed by Anatoly, who flew it all those years ago. And not least the Bears, but we've got Tom Bolt's Red One, leader of the Red Arrows this year, already put his, I'm sure Lingy would be bidding for that straight away, actually. But Lingy, what other things are on offer?
Well, there is actually a flight with me and one of your friends with one of my Blades team oppos, so you can bid on a flight for two with the Blades aerobatic team.
Fantastic. John, do you fancy something on the list?
Actually, I've had my eye on driving a Russian tank. So behind Lingy there is my Russian aeroplane, so I think I need to put the two together and see if actually driving a tank is anything similar to driving a Russian aeroplane.
Brilliant. Well, look, the other thing we want to do really is also engage with you throughout the course of the afternoon, and we've got some fascinating aircraft and interesting people to chat to right through the next couple of hours. But we want to know what you think and what you're interested in as well. So text in your questions or just go onto the online chat line, put them up. We've got a whole team working behind the scenes here, and we've already got a couple of questions in. And these guys not too prepped for this yet. John, an interesting one for you in the charity itself. Do you have any idea who how old the youngest and the eldest people that you've ever flown in the charity?
Well, we've been flying people at Airability all the way back to its inception here at Biggin Hill, actually in 1993. And on our 25th anniversary of the charity, we did some research. The youngest person we've flown is 7 years old, and the oldest is 98. And we fly about 1,000 people a year.
That is a fantastic achievement, absolutely. There's hope for us yet to keep flying. Well, that's marvellous news. Lingy, here's an interesting one for you. Okay, a lot of people would be interested to know, what would you have done had you not got into the Royal Air Force?
Well, that is a very good question. I had one goal in my mind going through school and growing up, which was to join the Royal Air Force. I didn't go to university because all I wanted to do was do my A-levels and join the Royal Air Force. And in fact, I didn't get in on my first attempt, and I was about to join the Army. I was 2 days away from moving down to Pirbright and joining the Army when I got a call from the careers office saying, right, come and have an interview to get into the Royal Air Force. And then 23 years later, this is where I am. So, yeah, I think I would have been in the Army as an aircraft technician in the REME.
That is absolutely extraordinary. Well, I could tell you a thing or two about that, having served in both forces. I'm currently immune from questions, which is just how we're going to keep this show going. So thank you very much for that. Well, having touched on the Cold War, we're going to get right bang up to date now. We managed to get a visit into this year's Typhoon display team.
Hi, Armchair Airshow. It's Flight Attendant James saying to you, Anarchy 1. Today we're going to show you some highlights of my 2021 full display. I hope you enjoy it, guys. So here we start on the runway selecting full reheat. This manoeuvre was designed by one of our corporals, Mike Bevan, who's on his last year on the team. So it's in dedication to him. So at 130 knots, I will rotate to 15 degrees nose up. Check the gear is up before I roll inverted, and we're looking to roll inverted here at 500 feet, accelerating the whole time to about 450 knots by the end of the runway. Pushing 10 degrees nose up, I roll through 540 degrees before pulling 9G up into a half horizontal. Over the top here, I will select max dry so that the aircraft starts to slow down as I select 40 degrees nose down and descend inverted towards the runway. At 2,000 feet, I'll roll the wings level and continue to descend to 100 feet for the pass in front of Datum, which is the middle of our airshow. At this point, I'm going to select full reheat and pitch up with full backstick to 20 degrees nose up into a climbing turn. At this point here, I'm trying to go through 270 degrees to line back up with the Datum point. Looking to line back up with the A-axis now, which is in line with the runway. We're going to be looking to select about 300 knots, and I auto throttle that using my left hand. It's a bit like the cruise control for the jet, so it will maintain 300 to 320 knots as I go through 90 degrees for the knife edge, invert in front of Datum with a 360 degree aileron roll before achieving the inverted again. I then select full reheat, and now I'm pushed against the straps, full forward stick to minus 3G to achieve 40 degrees nose up. There's a roll there before achieving a gate height now of 3,200 feet, again below 250 knots before I pull through. The reheat's in the whole time. At this point here, I'm trying to line back up with the A-axis, descending back down to 500 feet. You'll get a good view of the underside of the belly, so when we have the Union flag jet, that'll be exceptional. And then we'll be pulling up into a dirty loop. Gear down, 250 knot entry, full reheat. As I go through the vertical, that point there is a slight ease for the gear limit and raising the gear. Before I pull through again, safety, I have to make sure that I'm above 3,200 feet with the gear up, below 250 knots. The next manoeuvre will be selecting full reheat in front of Datum, and at this point is when you'll hear the most noise from the jet. Many car alarms seem to go off at this point on the ground. So you can see there the pure power of the two EJ200 engines pushing the jet from 120 knots up to 400 miles an hour in the space of 5 seconds into the vertical. As I'm passing 1,800 feet there, it's going to be a double roll through 540 before achieving wings level, again gate 3-2 below 250 knots, pulling through to point back at Datum on the 45. Display brake looking for about 500 knots, pointing back at the B-axis to depart the airshow, pulling full backstick at 9G there. Once I've achieved the vertical, I'm looking to do 3 times aileron rolls on the way up. This aircraft is now climbing extremely fast. Top ceiling 55,000 feet, albeit I'll stop it at about 8,000 feet at this point. Guys, I hope you really enjoyed that, and it was a pleasure presenting my display to you today. Have a great weekend.
Well, the Typhoon is an ever-popular display item, of course, as are most of the connections. But let's just catch up, first of all, on the charitable aspects. And we're doing our very best to raise funds. John, tell me, where do the funds go? What are they really needed for?
Well, it's putting people in the air. And I mentioned earlier on the aviation education program, £1,000 will see a youngster through our 6-month ground-based program to introduce them to aviation, or £100 will take a disabled person flying, just like Sophie is right now. But we can go to the other end of the scale. £50,000 is our fuel bill for the year to help run our fleet of 5 specially adapted aircraft.
That's serious money, and to get serious money, we've all got to work very hard. Now, we've mentioned the auction site, but we can donate by text as well, Mike. Tell us about that.
We can, yeah. So if you can go to, armchairairshow.com, where you can pledge online. But if you want to do it by text, then you can actually do it by texting FLY5 to 70490. That will donate £5. If you want to donate £10, just text FLY10 to 70490. And you can go all the way up to 20. So if you want to go 20, fly 20.
That's fantastic. So do stay with us now. We hope everything's running on track now for the rest of the afternoon. Now, talking about popular air display items, if it's not the Typhoon, many of you will recognize this. And I certainly have waved to the Chinook crew on many, many occasions for many years. It is truly one of the public's most welcome air displays around the entire United Kingdom. Well, our roving reporter, Liz McConaughey, who's based over there, knows the crews well, has been talking to this year's display team.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I am sat on the ramp of a Chinook, which is a very familiar place for me, and I'm being joined by Flight Lieutenant Matt Smith, who is the current Chinook display captain. So what has been like your absolute career highlight on the back of it, on flying the Chinooks?
I think, and I reckon most of the force that they did at the same time will agree, but it'll be IRT in Afghan.
Yeah.
Nothing will compare to just being on call and effectively helping people out.
What's been the scariest moment then on a Chinook? We all have them.
Yeah. The most scary you probably ever feel is when it's out of your control, and it's something that very, very infrequently happens. But obviously, when something goes wrong with the aircraft, and you either put it in a field or something goes wrong in flight, that mechanical failures happen. It happens on cars. They happen in aircraft. We're obviously trained to deal with them, but it's still not nice having it out of your control.
Yeah. Mine's the same. We hit wires years ago, and I'll take getting shot at with bullets all day long because actually there's something you can do with that one, but whenever there's something goes wrong with the aircraft, it's like
certainly something like that as well. I was unfortunate to hit a set of wires in the Falklands, and I think it just feels that there's something there that you're not aware of that just happens, and it's just it's not pleasant
on the
side.
Damage you've done as well when you hit wires.
Yes.
And live back the whole way back in the Falklands, live back to Mount Pleasant. It's not fun. If you could take one of these amazing beasts away, someone hands you the key, well not quite the key, but
there is a key.
There is a key. And said you can go anywhere in the world, you can fly anywhere you like for one last trip, where would you go?
I mean, I'd relive the last 10 years immediately and do all of it again. But if I had to pick one, it would be flying I'd be flying one of two sets of heli lanes in the world. Either London, because it never gets old seeing London from the sky. Certainly by night when it's all lit up, and especially at Christmas, is fantastic.
Especially when the M25 is jammed up.
Oh yeah, when you're beating all the traffic home is fantastic. Is brilliant. Or the other one would be LA. The two routes you can go through that, either not above 100 foot flying down the beach underneath LAX's approach and departure lane, or through the middle of the city, flying between skyscrapers that are mirrored windows, and you can see yourself in the window.
Oh, I'm very jealous. See, I've never done LA. I did the San Diego heli lanes, but I've never done LA.
Oh, and past the Hollywood sign as well, and in the same sortie is great fun. Really good fun.
So how's the display looking for this year?
So it started. The workup started. So we've had a handful, maybe about 6 or 7 sorties now, and it's slowly progressing through the safer stages of doing everything at 200 foot rather than our PDA height of 100. But it's going really well. I'm really excited to finally get it going. Obviously, with this year off that we've all have to live through. There are a few confirmed shows at the moment, which I don't want to tell you too much about at the moment because it's still a little bit of a secret. But yeah, it's looking good, and I think everyone's aware it's still going to be a bit of a slow year in terms of shows go, but it's definitely a year nonetheless that the Chinook will be out there pleasing the crowds.
Hello and welcome to the 2021 Chinook display video. We're part of the Chinook display team and are here to talk to you today about the operational manoeuvres we use during the Chinook display.
Here you can see us descending to 100 foot above the ground using our rad alt to judge the height. This becomes second nature for all our aircrew as we routinely transit at 100 foot around the UK and down to 50 foot while on operations. As the aircraft rolls to the right, you can see us pushing the aircraft to the limits, rolling up to 60 degrees angler bank.
While coming out of the right-hand turn, you can see us slow the aircraft down for our next manoeuvre, which is the nose-down quick stop. It can be done to both the left and right to help slow the aircraft down in an incredibly short distance. This is very useful when we have a late spot of troops in operations or are working to a landing site that we are flying tactically into. It's a difficult procedure to fly and takes a lot of getting used to, as you're having to put the nose down to slow the aircraft rather than the nose up.
If you've ever been to an air show, this is one of the crewman highlights. Don a big orange hand and wave to the crowds. But if this is your first time seeing inside a Chinook, you'll actually see a lot of aircraft components. During the flight, the crew will complete several scan checks, and by being able to see the components, we can identify if a fault has arisen. Part of the crewman's scan checks are to look at the engines. Difficult to do mid-flight unless we have bubble windows, which is what you can see. The rear port and starboard windows are actually concave and allow the crewman to look outside the aircraft, which not only aids with lookout, but also that fault diagnosis.
Having established in the hover, we now go into an old manoeuvre which we dub the Gorney Spiral Climb. Although it is a dated tactical departure, this manoeuvre now allows us to demonstrate the capability of the aircraft whilst showing it off to the crowds at air shows. During the climb, we rotate through 540 degrees before we convert this into a spiral descent with the nose down, adjusting us back to crowd centre.
Here you can see us setting up for a running landing on the aft wheels. This technique is used to limit the power demand on the engines and the transmission. The aircraft is descended to 100 foot again and the airspeed reduced to 80 knots. We have precise limits for this manoeuvre to make sure the aft rotor doesn't get too close to the ground. The non-handling pilot will be talking about the nose-up attitude and the speed over the ground, allowing the handling pilot to remain eyes out at all times.
The rearwards taxi is occasionally used on the front line if we need to get out of a tight parking spot at an airfield. It's a great CRM exercise involving all members of the crew to ensure the aircraft taxis safely, particularly when reversing, as you get to see here.
Once the crewman has given us the clear above and behind, the aircraft now re-enters the hover where we carry out the over-shoulder departure. The over-shoulder can be used when ground taxiing isn't an option. This can occur during a contact from the front of the aircraft, and the quickest way to depart is into the 6 o'clock, or the other instance we may use it is when we're flown into a tight HLS and are unable to transit into the 12 o'clock to depart. Essentially what you see is the aircraft taking off in a rearwards direction before yawing into the direction of travel. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned to social media to find out our latest updates on the display season.
I had the best day being back at RAF Odium amongst colleagues and old friends, and even just sitting in the back of a Chinook, it just took me straight back to my wonderful career flying on them. And the Chinook crew have very kindly donated a signed print for our auction today. So if you enjoyed that and you're a bit of a Chinook fan like me, get bidding on that. And other ways you can support us today, if you like the hoodie that I'm sporting today, you can buy one of those as well on www.armchairairshow.com. Okay, I'm going to hand you back to John now, who is speaking with one of my favourite human beings. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Liz. Yes, well, I'm stood in front of an Airability aircraft, the Technam, and with me is indeed a good friend of mine as well, Harvey Matthewson. Harvey is a member of staff at Airability and is also a pilot. And Harvey is going to tell us about what's up next. Harvey.
Thank you for the welcome. Hello, viewers. I started flying with Airability in 2016, and since then have developed a multitude of transferable skills and indeed confidence. But it is not all about me. It is time now to introduce you to the rest of the Airability family in this short film.
Hello and welcome to Airability. My name's Mike and I'm the Chief Executive of the charity. A very special charity that supports disabled people with all sorts of disability types through the magic and wonder of flight.
The feeling of being able to fly and once not being able to do it and now being able to do it is just amazing.
The one thing that's fantastic about Airability is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
Doesn't matter what disability you have, you can all be doing the same thing. I have Asperger's syndrome. It's just freedom pretty much in the airline.
They were geared up for my physical impairment. I was a bit unsure as to how they'd react to me saying I was registered blind, but the minute I mentioned it, they said, yeah, that's no problem.
I have to say a massive thank you to Airability, because they turned my life around and they gave me that purpose back. They gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
We're here to support you, whatever your disability. So please do get in touch and we can help you get into the sky to experience the wonder and magic of flight.
Well, whether you're an aviator or not, I think you'll agree this is just an inspirational organisation and charity to be involved in. So please do join in the bidding on the auction line, and don't forget to text donate as well during the course of the afternoon. Now, I think you know by now I'm a bit of a heritage and history buff as far as aviation is concerned, and I'm delighted to be surrounded by artifacts. You see, the set today has been dressed by Aerotiques, and we must thank them as well as all the other supporters and sponsors we've had. But this particular propeller is also part of the auction today, and I'm pretty sure this is off a Bulldog, but it's been really beautifully restored, and I think would be befitting any aviator who's perhaps had the odd bump or two in his career as well. But talking of history and heritage, there is nothing better that I think pleases the sights and sounds of air shows around UK than the sound of Sally B, the B-17, and John has been across to Duxford to talk to the crew.
Well, welcome to historic Duxford in Cambridgeshire, the Imperial War Museum. I'm joined today by Ellie Sallingbow, the operator of the B-17 aircraft. And over here is Sally B, the B-17 aircraft based at Duxford, the only airworthy B-17 in Europe. Ellie, welcome to the Armchair Airshow. We're going to talk to you today about the aircraft and how it is a living memorial to the 79,000 American airmen that lost their lives in the war, and how you take this aircraft around the country telling the story. Ellie, my first question to you is, what does it feel like to operate this aircraft?
The job was given to me when my then partner, Ted White, was killed in a harbour in Malta, and he had just brought the aircraft to England a few years earlier. Once the shock subsided slightly, all the team and the friends around Ted and myself and the aeroplane, we got together to organise the very first Great Warbirds air display, and that ran for 13 years.
So Ellie, it's a big day today. Tell us what has been happening at Duxford today with the aircraft.
Well, if I tell you that we went undercover at the end of the season 2019, and we just got a brand new engine on, and we have never tested it because it was raining and raining, so we had to get it undercover, so we couldn't test it before it went inside the hangar. And it hasn't been out since, so we haven't tested that engine at all. So today, all the engines haven't been tested at all for 2 years almost, and the new engine never. So to see them all starting up one by one, even though they smoke like hell, it's just fantastic.
I'm joined by Peter Kuipers, who is a training captain on the B-17 and also a display pilot on the B-17. Now, put us in the cockpit, Peter. What is she like to fly? How does she handle?
She's lovely to fly. And she flies like a small Piper Cub. Okay, you got the weight, the inertia. You have to think about that. But this B-17 has no power steering. It's all done by old-fashioned steel cables, and yes, that makes it heavy. Being used to big aircraft my whole life, that's not an issue. But she is easy to fly, and it's a joy.
What limitations, Peter, do you place on the operation of the aircraft just to ensure safety?
Well, the runway has to be long enough, but we're not carrying bombs nowadays, so minimum runway length for us would be 1,200 meters. That's the minimum. Duxford is slightly longer than that. And crosswind, we are limited to 15 knots of crosswind. Anything more, this aircraft will stay on the ground.
And what's it like to operate the aircraft from a historic United States Army Air Force airfield here at Duxford? I mean, it feels it's the perfect place to have the aircraft based.
It is the perfect base for this B-17 Sally B.
When she arrived at Biggin Hill, And then she stayed there a few weeks, and then she went to Duxford, to her new home, at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford, where she has lived for the past 44 years.
Duxford, the IWM, the Imperial War Museum, is our partner in this. We help them, they help us. Today we came out of the hangar. It's a hangar that's owned by Duxford. It's a joy. It's, I can't explain. It's just so special that you're allowed to do that. And not only flying it, but also commemorating the Allied airmen that flew them in wartime.
We are trying to give back to what the Americans did for us during the war. You have to think that today, would young guys, 17, 18, 19, 20, go along and be killed in another country and just arrive there and be nothing and be shut down?
Yeah, I can't imagine that myself as well. I'm a modern pilot flying in nice sunny weather. We don't even operate in winter time. We don't fly at high altitudes, we only fly low level because we only do air shows. So it's completely different nowadays. Yes, because I'm involved in the B-17, I do think about what happened then.
And those guys, they deserve the biggest memorial you can give them.
We're going to overfly American Cemetery at Mattingly, where some of those people that used to fly it in the Second World War are buried. People that used this machine to fight a war. I'm just a lucky pilot that's allowed to fly it nowadays.
This aircraft flies, I would say, on love. I can't say it any better than that. It is the love that people give back. And it's always been a bit like that. It's the team. Today we are here at Duxford. There's 20 team members who's been painting the aircraft, who's been overhauling it for the last 18 months. We're all volunteers. Every single person, pilots to ground people, they are all volunteers.
So how can people find out more about the B-17 and how can they support?
Well, if around the world, it shouldn't be too complicated if you just look at www.salib.org.uk.
And I would really like to thank Ellie Sellingbo, she's the operator of the aircraft, for giving me the opportunity to fly this machine.
Peter, we look forward to seeing you in the summertime at an air show near you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
John, it's my pleasure.
The B-17 Salibi actually came into the UK via Biggin Hill in 1975. Ellie Sellingbo, who operates that aircraft, learnt to fly here, and her late partner, Ted White, who's remembered on engine number 2 with his checker cowling, is buried in Biggin Hill indeed, and the first display by the B-17 was at Biggin Hill. So, you know, Biggin Hill's popping up everywhere. But, Lingy, what's coming up next?
Well, we're going to go back to the jets now, John. So we're going back to jets, and we are going to go to a Viper, an F-16 display. Now, there are quite a few countries who have an F-16 display, but one of them is very special to me. It was established in 2010, and the gentleman who was the founding pilot for that display, I met up with online, but he was actually he's a good buddy of mine. He was the first on scene after I ejected from a Red Arrows Hawk over a Greek airfield. He was on quick reaction alert, so he was 30 seconds away from where I landed in my parachute having ejected. So he came to speak to me, and I bumped into him in 2012 at a conference, and since then we've been excellent friends. And I got to catch up with him to talk to him about his Zeus demo team. So it really is my pleasure to introduce Manolis Karachalios, who is a former F-16 pilot from the Hellenic Air Force in Greece and was the founding member of the Greek Zeus demo team, the Viper demo team. Can you tell us when it was established?
Sure. The Zeus demo team was established in 2010. We started the training in January with the US Air Force Viper demo team. And they trained not only me, but also Dimitris Kondoulis. We were both in Souda Air Force Base. And for 2 weeks, it was very intense training, very detailed, you know. We got ourselves good to go. And since then, the Zeus demo team is demonstrating the capabilities of the Greek pilots and the Hellenic Air Force, not only in Greece, but also in Europe.
We've got some footage now from one of your first years as a display pilot. If you could talk us through it, Manos, that'd be great.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is actually the first international air show of the Zeus demo team in 2011. This is in Radom, setting up myself, nose up for the high Z turn, max AB at 500 feet AGL. Actually, we call it the high Z turn. It's just at the beginning we go high G. Obviously, the airplane is it can pull up to 9 Gs. At the beginning we go 9, and then we go up to 5 to 6 Gs. So that was at the end, it was 5 to 6 Gs. Now again on a vertical reposition, inverted, pulling, pushing the nose up to hold it there with 0 or -1 Gs. And then waiting for a bit, passing 5,500 feet AGL, and then you're gonna see me pulling through the vertical with some flares and all the way down to get myself on the main display line. As you can see, the Viper back in the days, the Zeus, we didn't have the smoke winders, so we needed the flares to get, you know, people always their eyes over the airplane. So that's pretty nice. Now I'm getting myself ready for the next maneuver. You can see 500 feet again. And for the 4-point roll, 2, 3, and 4. A lot of dust in the airplane while I'm inverted or, you know, pushing some negative Gs. And then back on the vertical reposition to get myself back on the display line. As you can see, the Greek F-16 display, it's mainly, you know, up and down on the display line, following the concept of the US Air Force that we don't put vector towards the crowd. And that's my favorite maneuver over here. It's the high alpha pass, the slow speed pass on the 500-foot line, waving to the people. It was so crowded, thousands of people all the way up vertical on the victory roll. This is the victory roll, the vertical climb up to 10,000 feet with some flares. And then this is the end of the display on landing. What I want to show you guys is actually, you can see me, and I've seen it actually yesterday. You can see the sweat on my forehead here. So it seems that I worked a lot during that display, and that was really great.
It's what brilliant footage, and you talk through that brilliantly. But everyone loves the F-16. I personally love the Greek F-16. Thank you very much for joining us on the Armchair Airshow.
Thank you very much, Mike. I wish you all the best to the Armchair Airshow, and I hope you keep on doing what you're doing. It's great to have you guys and show the resilience of the airshow community. Thank you very much.
Well, we're getting so many different activities here this afternoon. In a few minutes, we're going to be going outside live. But right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Phil Hood. He's the events manager for the most wonderful destination, the Imperial War Museum, of course, at Duxford. So, Phil, tell me, what is the secret behind Duxford's success as an aviation destination?
Thanks, George. Well, I personally feel like we're the biggest aviation museum in Europe. And we're still an active airfield, and we have been an active airfield since around 1917. And I think that really helps, because on your day out on your visit to Duxford, you're coming to where history actually happened. So every building you walk inside, every footstep you take is following, in the footsteps of pilots from the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, beautiful place. Now, you've been very fortunate in being able to mobilize air shows over the last year or so, and you're getting ready for, I know, for a big one in a couple of weeks' time. What's your overall vision and plan for the future? How are you going to take air shows and Duxford through the next decade?
So, again, really interesting question. So we're really pushing aviation events forward at Duxford. As you say, we're planning for a show in July. We're just waiting for the last bit of government guidance, and then we'll be announcing what our plan is for that. But aviation events and air shows are so key for what we do at Duxford. They really support the IWM as well. And so we're going to continue them. So this year we will go ahead with some shows. We're just waiting for that. So we've got 2 shows this year, and then we have 10 flying days as well. So flying days, if you don't know, your normal day out at Duxford. There's a bit more going on the ground, so you can see some living history groups, you can meet some of our partners, and also we have an afternoon flying display. So I had one last weekend with Spitfires and Hurricanes and the Catalina. And we've got a range of that looking forward. So every year moving forward now, we'll be doing 2 major shows, and we'll also be doing 10 flying displays, which also help bring new people into the aviation industry. I've benefited from myself as a new FDD, and we're looking to continue that moving forward as well. So the real future is we want to do as many aviation days at Duxford as possible. If you want to find out more, come over to our website, sign up to our e-news, and that's where we're going to push out all the information about this year's shows and 2022. Not going to give you any teasers just yet, but it's going to be really exciting next year, the plans that we've got. So yeah, sign up to e-news and we'll be pushing that out later in the summer.
Oh, well, that's fantastic news. Now, I hear that the Dakota is already on its way into Biggin Hill, so we're going to have to cut. But on my way there, I just want to give a big shout out for Shuttleworth as well for their award-winning drive-in air shows. Well done, Shuttleworth, and especially well done, Phil Hood and Duxford. Let's go outside and see some live action.
Were student colleagues back in the 90s, and the co-pilot, Flight Lieutenant Paul Wise, known as Ernie.
Back to 1935 with this series. Started off, of course, as the DC-3 Skytrain. I mean, an extraordinary aircraft in many respects, and converted to so many different roles. But do you really know the background to the word Dakota? Well, there are two versions, really. The first one is, of course, the First Nation use of the word, which relates to a friend or an ally, and I think that's very fitting. Keep a lookout now. The camera's hopefully tracking the Dakota as it comes back through for another pass. The normal stick, of course, would be 28 fully equipped troops. We're giving them all a wave here from the ground. Fantastic. But there was one extraordinary mission out in Burma many years ago, 1942 I think it was, when very much like in all wars you go way over capacity in your cargo. They picked up 63 people who are under threat in the Burmese jungle area. Absolutely extraordinary mission.
The aircraft served in every major theatre of World War II. And I understand that 10,000 were built, as you said, George, but they also saw a huge part in the Berlin airlift, particularly between June 1948 and May 1949, dropping food and fuel. 2 million tons they contributed to saving, really, the lives of those, isolated Berliners.
Yeah, it's a real workhorse. And a magnificent sight, and just the most perfect day here at Biggin Hill. Blue sky, little fluffy cumulus fair weather clouds. Just left John inside there, and we were talking about the derivation of Dakota and the American Goonie bird. Also, favourite nickname amongst that time was the gunship, of course, John, the AC-47, known as Puff the Magic Dragon. Yeah. Yeah, but the other derivative, of course, Dakota, the Douglas Aircraft Corporation transport aircraft. So we're now focusing on the departure of the Spitfire And really, we mentioned that no air show was complete without the red arrows, but in my mind, absolutely, the one aircraft you need in every air show is a Spitfire. And a singleton is as poignant as you can get in many respects to show off the beautiful lines, that marvellous creation of R.J. Mitchell and his team, remarkable inspiration, a design which made it in the nick of time. Of course, during the early years of the Battle of Britain, it was the Hurricane that dominated the early combat period, and therefore, unsurprisingly, counting the majority of the early kills. But the sheer dash, elan, speed and style of the Spitfire brought fear into the lives of many enemy participants. An extraordinary period in many ways. 22,000 of these Spitfires were made, 22 different variants, the most remarkable success story of any fighter aircraft in British history. The Battle of Britain itself, of course, synonymous, engraved in the memories of many of us. And here we are at Biggin Hill today, reliving that entire heritage. And Peter Monk and his team across the runway from us here have done the most magnificent job restoring, recovering not just this aircraft, but many others. Of course, the Kent Spitfire also representing so many other Spitfires for which the communities around Great Britain contributed together, each putting money into their own Spitfire, and countless stories. John, you're a Kent man. This must be very special for you.
It is indeed very special for me, and I actually live in a village about 6 miles east of Biggin Hill called Kemsing, and I would say on a nice sunny day like this we will get at least 6 or 7 Spitfires zooming over to the east and then heading back to Biggin Hill, taking people for a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But he mentioned R.J. Mitchell earlier on. It was sad in a way that he never actually got to see his design, take to the air and really save this country from the tyranny of Nazi Germany. I mean, of course, it wasn't just the Spitfire, it was the Hurricane as well. And in the 1950s, Biggin Hill said goodbye to the Spitfire Mark 21s. The 1950s, it was an incredible design, and of course it went through so many marks until it finally went out of service in the Royal Air Force.
Yeah, it's interesting you say the Mark 21. Of course, the extra mark, where I refer to 22 variants, don't forget the Royal Navy Seafire as well, adding to that mark. And of course, even today, we have a Mark 26 using the Jabiru and the Lycoming engines and things like that as well. So the design lives on today. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Oh, well, it does. And of course, there's almost a rebirth of the Spitfire in terms of its appeal to air displays, and of course now the rulings from the UK Civil Aviation Authority allow people to fly in these aircraft. And I believe there's upwards of 65 airworthy Spitfires now, because we need to make sure this heritage stays alive, particularly at Biggin Hill. I couldn't think of anywhere better to have a Spitfire flight.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, famous in so many other ways. It was a Mark 9 out of the Castle Bromwich factory in 1944. Castle Bromwich, it was extraordinary, the number of factories that were developed, particularly after the bombing of Southampton, of course, earlier in the war, when they realized that dispersal was absolutely essential. But then to keep the effort going, car manufacturers in particular utilized to produce these aircraft. And here we go now. We're going to concentrate. Let's take a shot. And I think a moment where we just savor the sight and sound of this truly wonderful Spitfire taking to the air.
Well, that sound you can hear there is Rich Goodwin starting in the jet pits. We will see Rich a little bit later on. So, of course, the Spitfire was designed as a short-range, high-performance interceptor fighter. Just like the lightning, and here we go from the right-hand side, Dan Griffith in the Mark 9 Spitfire. Pulling up there into a wing over to the right, and you can see that beautiful shape of the wing there, that R.J. Mitchell design, that elliptical wing. The most efficient wing for air-to-air combat during that period in the 1940s.
Yeah, now having mentioned combat, John, of course the whole development of war, it does amazing things. And one of the turning points, when the Spitfires and the Hurricanes first flew, they had a very short burst, only sort of around 20 seconds or so. But it wasn't just the increase in ammunition, but the move from 303 to cannon. And I'm going to talk to Lingy about that. That must have been a game changer in combat engagement.
It absolutely was. So that the 303 machine guns. We got in-cockpit live shots of the Spitfire, I'm told, so let's let the crowd...
Wow, fantastic.
Now, we can see inside the cockpit now with Dan as he positions the aircraft over Biggin Hill, giving us just a wonderful impression of this iconic aircraft. You can see Dan working hard there, looking around to pick up the line. And we'll be hearing a bit later about the technicalities of putting on an air display and what the pilots have to consider to position themselves above the airfield. Beautiful top side pass there again, showing the beautiful wing design of the Spitfire. And George, you mentioned the 303 machine guns on the Spitfire. Of course, we were at a disadvantage at the beginning of the war. Of course, the Messerschmitts had the 20mm cannons, so it wasn't until the advent of the Mark 5 Spitfire that we could actually come up against the 109 favourably.
Absolutely, firepower means everything, doesn't it, as well as the agility. I was just going to reckon we were on combat, and of course the statistics of the Second World War and the pilots themselves, absolutely extraordinary. The average age of the British pilots involved was just 22, the average life expectancy just 4 weeks, and actually of the 500 of the sort of 2,500, I should say, pilots involved, 574 of them were not even British.
Incredible, isn't it, George? Yes. And I can say, actually, that 450 pilots who flew from Biggin Hill lost their lives in air combat.
You've been doing your homework, haven't you? It's great stuff. It's so good to be involved with Spitfire flying.
So I'm just going to apologise, everybody watching. We want to hear this majestic Merlin engine on the Spitfire, but just as Dan was running in to start his display, we had our next 2 display acts start up right in front of the microphone. So we're just going to finish off. I'm going to stop talking and listen to Dan's Merlin. We got him.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic footage there. We're just getting the visuals ourselves out on the pan. And Dan Griffiths clearly in his
I've seen an awful lot of Spitfire displays,
element.
and this is my favourite. Dan Griffiths, the way he flies these Spitfires is just jaw-dropping. He handles it so beautifully, and now he's coming in from a steep dive from the north. Listen to this beautiful Merlin engine again. And a wing rock, an aggressive wing rock from Dan there as he positions to the south, and that, I think, would signal the end of his display. Absolutely beautiful, and a very incredible performance from Dan Griffiths. And I think we're very lucky to have live in-cockpit footage being beamed down from that aircraft for you viewers on YouTube this afternoon. It's just an amazing spectacle.
Well, all I can say is, Lingy, that's the first time I've heard you say anything in the last 10 minutes, because I don't think everybody's appreciated that out on the pan here. That was pretty noisy experience, and we didn't have the benefit of the footage at the time. But
we've got the microphones working. So while we've got you and we've got a little gap in the program, we're just going to talk about that text to donate service. So we can text fly5 to 70490 to donate £5, or fly 10 to 70490 to donate £10. Right, what have we got coming up now, gentlemen?
Well, we've seen 2 taxi out, so we've still got 2 displays to go. I reckon it should be Richard Goodwin in the pits next, but let's wait and see. Other than that, it'll be Tim Zeus in the Grob 109, I suspect. Now, we know both of them extremely well, and they are both outstanding displays in their own right. But Richard Goodwin, of course, has been messing about with his aircraft, as he always does. He's one of those tenacious, adventurous individuals for whom normality is just not enough. He has to expand, go forward, and I hope that we've got a clip, a preview of what he's been doing with this particular aircraft, because I went up to Gloucester Airport just a couple of weeks ago and managed to interview him, looking at both the aircraft he has been using and the one he is now going to roll out for this season.
So just coming to a stop on the runway, and you can see there that sign where it says 2103 Cap 1 D3. That's the Delta 3 hold for runway 03 and 21 here at Biggin Hill. And down with the cockpit open, taxi is left off the runway, and he's going to come and park right in front of us. So we'll stop talking again and let you listen to the sound of that beautiful engine as he comes to shut down in front of us here on the apron in front of Hangar 2 at Biggin Hill Airport. As he taxis in, you might see Dan's head pop out the cockpit. With the hood back, it's very difficult actually to see when we're taxiing a Spitfire, that long Merlin engine just blocking his view. So he might stick his head out the side of the cockpit to get a good left and right view. And he's taxiing in to park in front of us. Here it comes.
As the Spirit of Kent closes down after his superb display. Just taking off the runway now, we've got Tim Zeus in the Grob 109 to give us a very short daylight version of the pyrotechnic display. And after that, we'll have Richard Goodwin coming in his pit special. I didn't see the jet engines fitted today, but we'll tell you more about that a little later. And we also had a video. We're not sure whether we're able to roll that for you now. But I have to say, conditions here on the pan, absolutely outstanding. And blessed we are, hopefully now, to see this through for the rest of the afternoon. John.
No, absolutely. And I was just thinking, looking at that Grob 9 taking off, we talked about how Airability has managed to achieve a few firsts in aviation. Now, Tim normally flies this display at night time. Now, he does attach fireworks to the wingtips. Yes, it is legal. He has the authority to do so. And in 2012, for the Paralympic opening ceremony, Airability once again made a first. We got permission to do a flying display over the stadium in London, live to an audience of an estimated 2 billion people. And Tim was instrumental in helping us to achieve that. So, you know, George, we always seem to do something first and then everyone else seems to follow.
Well, you are inspirational in many, many ways, that's for sure. I remember the very first night pyrotechnic display. Pete Wells basically got his authorization literally 24 hours before the show at Bournemouth. And Bournemouth, well, also close to your hearts at Airability as well, but mounted the very first night pyrotechnic display, and it was truly awesome, and an experience to be remembered, and of course developed by Tim and Guy and many others now in this respect. The pyrotechnics themselves, of course, incredibly safe actually, and they're very, very low temperature. They're very deceiving. You would expect it to be coming off like sort of phosphorus and very high, but no, not at all. And now very much a fixture of many, many air displays, unsurprisingly. And it also extraordinarily fitting it to what effectively are plastic airplanes as well.
I know, yes, you do fear that the wings will melt, but it's a cunning design. And of course, you know, if you are flying at night, you do need still to fly in terms of the leading aircraft by visual reference to the horizon. So these are dusk displays, but you know, they do seem to cut it fine. And a bit of cloud cover, they want to make sure that it's, of course, a safely conducted display, as well as very dynamic and, you know, keen on the eye.
And the other aspect is they have to land by sunset plus 30 as well. So that's what makes the most of them dust. But of course, those with all the various ratings, and I know others, apparently now we've got an opportunity to go to the jet pits, and this is going to be a dramatic start. If you have not seen Richard Goodwin perform, he has some extraordinary, what can we say, not necessarily waivers, but authorizations to do it. And his traditional start is something of an eyeful. And we won't, for those who've not seen it, we'll just let you view it first of all. But once he gets into the display, there's so much going on that we've decided that actually the best of us talk about this is going to be Lingy, who spends most of his time going upside down anyway. So Lingy, over to you.
Thanks, George. I've not seen Richard's display for probably 2 years now after the very slow summer last year. But what I have seen online is a smiley face that he draws in the sky. And it's been huge on social media. He was just putting some love into the skies of Bristol and Gloucester by drawing his smiley face with his smoke from his aeroplane. I hope we're going to get that today, because the stunning weather here at Biggin Hill is a beautiful blue sky, and I'm hoping he's going to be doing it. So I think at minute 2.5, which is coming up, we're going to get Rich Goodwin in his jet pits lining up for takeoff. So I can actually see down the end of the runway. He's on runway 03, so he's on the northerly runway. I think he's been given clearance to take off by air traffic control. Getting a nod from my man who's in the know. And then we're going to be getting a camera on Rich as he accelerates down the runway and gets ready for this rather jaw-dropping takeoff. There we go, the smoke's on, brakes are off. He's got a huge amount of horsepower in this ridiculous aeroplane, heavily modified by Rich himself. Up he goes, rotates. He's going to get to about 10 feet now. And just pulls straight up into the vertical with that huge amount of smoke flying. Hovering on the prop there as he's just flying forwards. He's going out on what we call the B-axis, so the crowd front, 90 degrees away from the crowd centre. And you can see the smoke billowing out of the back of the aeroplane. He's now turning the aeroplane using just his feet. Now push forward, diving down to get out to about 120 miles an hour. Good amount of roll rate in this aeroplane. He's got heavily modified ailerons, a couple of snaps upwards, and now pushing minus about 3.5 G according to his notes. So he's pushing around this circle. He's not pulling, he's pushing. All the blood's going to his head, really working hard to fight that force. And now straight into a pull. So pulling the G, now going upside down, along the runway at about 200 feet, into a knife edge.
Now, Lee, what I find
Now,
amazing
knife
about...
edge, when he puts the wings at 90 degrees to the flight, so when he's got the wings pointing straight up and down, he's having to use his feet to keep the aeroplane flying level. So there's a lot of rudder keeping the aeroplane level as he flies along with the wings and knife edge. Now into another spin. Great noise from this propeller as he performs these maneuvers.
What I find incredible about its design, can you believe it dates back to 1944, and the Pitt Special design dominated world aerobatic competitions in the 1960s and 70s. And as George said earlier on, Rich has done some incredible modifications to this aircraft. The original Pitts just couldn't do this.
That was a very hard pull, probably about 7G pull as he pulls up through his loop here. Another flick at the top. We're quite restricted here at Biggin Hill. Of course, the London Terminal Manoeuvring Area, the TMA, which is the London airspace going into Heathrow and Gatwick, is directly above Biggin Hill. In fact, there is a hold at one of the navigation beacons, which you might have seen on the other side of the airfield on some of our camera footage. But that restricts Rich here to about 1,900 feet above the airfield. So he's squeezing this in display. He's squeezing it all underneath that airspace. Very tight loop as he flies it, quite slow speed at about 1,000 feet there.
Lingy, I can't help but say, but I'm reminded of the Rothmans team and things like that, and Brian Lecombre and all the others. You were but a wee bunny boy by then.
Absolutely.
But
I've got such vivid memories of watching that Rothmans team here at Biggin Hill, and I love Rich's display. It's just such an energetic routine. I think he's absolutely crazy, some of the things he does, and how he's modified these aircraft, which we'll hear about shortly.
Now, we focused earlier on about women in aviation, and of course it was a woman that also helped to make this aircraft really famous. Her name was Betty Skelton. She named her aircraft the Little Stinker, and if you go to Washington Dulles Airport, you can see her aircraft hung suitably upside down in the museum there.
Another spin down now as Rich points down the A-axis, so the runway is our main display line here, the A-axis. He's getting back onto that at about 200 feet. Heavy pull again. Very quick roll left and then right, or right then left in fact. And then a snap to the inverted, and then a push up. He's doing really well to keep this below this airspace and on that line. See a bit of drift in the smoke, so there's a little bit of a wind coming across the runway here. Again, that push-pull with the G, that's the hardest G-force for a pilot to really fight against, is when you've pushed and then straight into a pull. Big barrel roll with another flick at the top.
Now, we're conscious of the environment as well, Lingy. Tell me a bit about the smoke, because I guess they use the same as the blades?
Absolutely. This is actually aerobatic smoke oil. It's designed specifically for this purpose. And it's a bit like baby oil. It has the same consistency, and it's all environmentally friendly. It's just injected into the exhaust and makes it vaporize as it comes out.
Good to hear that. Saving the planet. Now, that's a bit like going in a washing machine and putting it on full tumble speed, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You've done a bit of that. How do you get out of it? How do you keep your head in one place?
Well, you might see on the wing of this aircraft, my Blades aeroplane, little sort of almost coat hanger-esque wing. They're called wing sights, and you use those for references of vertical, 45 degree up, 45 degree down, and it gives you a really good reference of where the aeroplane is pointing, and then you know with the energy you've got in the aircraft what control inputs you're going to put in to make it do some of these gyroscopic maneuvers. You're actually using the engine quite a lot to perform these maneuvers. So this, we'll just finish this as he does a slide into another flick. Picking up the slide as he finishes, more pushing. Yeah, so he'll be using the engine and the gyroscopic effect of that very powerful engine in the propeller to actually use that to help perform the aerobatics.
So I think he's just cooling off the engine a bit here, but I'm guessing that when he ignites the jet engines, when he gets that far, he'll go from hanging off the prop to then climbing vertically. Do you think that's what he's got in his mind?
I can't wait to hear that when he fires up those jet engines. I've seen the size of them. They are much bigger than I expected. Nice little spiral dive as he comes down towards us. Rich is a former Tornado pilot. And believe his day job when the COVID allows is that he's actually an airline pilot, George.
Yes, well, he's got aviation in his blood. His father, I'm pretty sure, used to display the Hunter.
Oh, can I just stop you there? This is called a torque roll. So he's gone vertical. He's perfectly vertical now using those wing sights I talked about. And when he gets to a certain point, of course, he can't keep going up, but he's rotating the aeroplane using the control surfaces. When he gets to a certain point, there's no aerodynamic flow over those control surfaces, but you still see the fuselage rotating, and that is an opposite reaction to the torque of the engine. So the fuselage is rotating purely against the propeller rotating.
It is an extraordinary manoeuvre, and that's when I reckon I would flick those switches on the jet engines.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's enjoying the airshow, please do get online at armchairairshow.com, where you can pledge, or remember there is a text service. Text fly5 to 70490 or fly10 to 70490, depending on the amount of money you would like to donate to support this fabulous charity. So I think that's Rich finished. I think he's now turning base or final for runway 03, landing in from the east there. And we've got the next act climbing to height. He's a little bit slow with a little bit less power, but he's still a very impressive display.
I don't think he's not over yet. So I'm just wondering whether he's positioning for his trademark fly past, and I think he is. And this is something where I'm pretty sure he makes use of the fuselage as an aerofoil, because he's now gone into his knife edge pass and he's going to fly all the way down the runway. Just take a close look at this.
So impressive. He normally does that on takeoff, George, so he's just foxed me. That's why I thought he was going to do it when he took off, but no, he's going to do it as he runs down the runway pre-landing. But a little wing waggle there after he did his knife edge pass, I think, signifies that is Rich complete. And we'll be very interested to see when he gets out the aeroplane here on the apron as to how his eyes are, if they're bulging out of his head, because that was a very impressive display of negative and positive G with ridiculous number of snap rolls and flick rolls. And
this is an exhausting business, isn't it? I mean, you do a lot of this yourself, and you really need to sort of calm down and just cool off for a moment.
After the COVID restrictions, where people haven't been flying, everyone seems very, or could be very unconditioned to it. So you become relatively conditioned to it the more you do. And in a busy summer, we've been doing loads of it. Of course, over the last 18 months or so, we've not been doing so many. But so that's Rich landing, and it was George who caught up with Rich at Gloucester Airport.
And indeed, it was a real pleasure to go up and just take a look at the plans that he's had. And he's a charming chap, but as I say, he's tenacious, he doesn't stand still, and he just is always searching for that little bit of extra. And here's a clip now of me chatting to him about his project to put 2 jet engines on the side of his very interesting pit special. Well, I've got Richard Goodwin with me here now. And Richard, tell me, you've had a fantastic career, but this is no average Pitts S2S. What have you done to perform those fantastic air displays?
Right, it all started about 5 or 6 years ago, George. I bought a bog standard S2S, remortgaged the house, and then started a development program. I was talking to Eddie, the design engineer, on the phone one day in the process of building another set of wings for this aircraft, and I was halfway through building them, and I thought, what am I going to do with the old wings when I put the new wings on this aircraft? And I thought, well, I've built almost half another aircraft, I'll build another airplane. So with the help of Eddie Salmon in America, who kind of specializes, he used to work with Curtis Pitts and knows a lot about Pitt Special.
On Richard Goodwin in just a moment, because running in a little earlier than we expected is Tim Dews, now already performing some beautiful shapes in the sky in the Grob 109. John earlier explaining the tight connection there is between the use of pyrotechnics and Airability charity as well, both pioneers. And very sadly, just as we're seeing an airliner going over the top of him, Richard, of course, you can hear coming in on the pan to shut down as well. So multiple layered activity, TMA busy, Biggin Hill busy, and the pan busy. John, a quick word on this beautiful display.
Well, absolutely, and I think British Airways are getting in on the act as well, aren't they, today? No, of course, this is a slightly more sedate air display because, of course, it's got less power, different wings. It's a different design of aircraft altogether. And now, I do remember back in the 1980s, the Unipart display team that flew two RF-4 powered gliders, very similar in design. Tim Dews does this display with his son. There's a two-ship as well as a singleton, and he does these dust displays we talked about earlier on. But also, yes, the Grob 109 design is Project Able, which Shona spoke about, and this is going to be a really exciting time for Airability, you know, and you're going to see a lot more of these aircraft painted up in Airability colours.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to slip out, if you don't mind. I'll let you finish this, and I'm going to locate Shona and have a chat with her about that project.
Wonderful, George. We'll see you later. So just Tim pulling up there into the vertical now and just pulling it over the top. And you've got to be very careful at the top of a loop. You know, the aircraft will talk to you. Those wings are producing lift. But if you pull a bit too hard and ask a bit too much, the airframe will talk to you. It'll judder, and you'll have to listen to that and just unload on the stick a little bit more just to keep those wings flying. And then, of course, you're used to this in the extra, a bit more power. But you can jiggle that buffet, can't you, in the extra, much better than you can in a Grob 109.
I think I haven't done any aerobatics in a glider for a long time, so and certainly I haven't actually flown a Grob 109. Of course, this was the Vigilant, which was the Air Cadet's powered glider before, unfortunately, it went out of service recently. But amazing airplane. It's beautifully quiet, and I'm noticing the Love NHS on the bottom as well as a nod to all the key workers and NHS personnel working so hard throughout the pandemic. How many different colours has he got, John? You know idea?
Well, I suppose he can decide what he wants to put on those wingtips. I mean, I've seen, what did we see earlier on? Green or blue was that? And now it's red. Using dye to change the colour of the smoke, just like the red arrows, of course.
But these aren't daylight pyrotechnics. It's actually a smoke system. I'm not really sure how it works. I saw them on the wingtips as he was taxiing out, but I haven't really had a good look as to how they operate.
Well, I think it's just pull one ring and then they just carry on. So it's a battery-powered ring pull from the cockpit. Nice wing over there, beautifully flown.
Of course, you go from Rich's very short wingspan pits with huge ailerons that actually span a lot of the trailing edge of the wing into this, which has got a massively wide wingspan with tiny little ailerons. So, of course, the roll rate is very, very different when it comes to performing just aileron rolls, so using the ailerons to roll the aircraft. The ailerons are if you like, the flaps, the control surfaces on the outboard edge of the wing that go up and down depending on what input you put in on the control column to roll the aircraft.
You probably wonder how you keep a lid on actually managing your flying sequence. Well, there was a man in the 1950s, Jose Aresti, a Spanish pilot, who figured out the conundrum of trying to use a language to dictate the type of aerobatic manoeuvres you see today. So all the aerobatics you've seen today, from Dan in the Spitfire, Rich in the pits, and now Tim in the Grob 109, they're all using the Aresti system to help manage and go forwards through their display, sequence by sequence, using visual, almost, you can call them hieroglyphics almost, can't you, on a piece of paper. They don't really mean much to anybody who's not really familiar with them.
I think that's Tim bringing that in for a landing.
Yep.
Very short landing roll on this tail dragging motor glider. Little squeak from the tyres as he touches down, and then he's going to vacate at the same place, the Spitfire, the pits, and then he'll be taxiing in. Much quieter engine than that, like homing in the pit special.
Of course, he can see over the cowlings on this aircraft. There's no long Merlin in front of him. And, of course, all the aircraft that are displayed today have a wheel at the back, tail draggers. So landing in a crosswind is quite a challenge because the centre of gravity of the aircraft is behind you. So you've got to be very careful not to let that tail swing out in front of you and cause what we call in piloting terms a ground loop.
There's Tim coming in. I'm just going to do a couple of shout-outs, John, while we've got a bit of a quiet period. I've got Dave Rowlands here, who says he's struggling to imagine a better Saturday. He's sat watching the show while he's building his Messerschmitt 109 in the summer house. Thanks for this. The footage and interviews have been immense so far. That's a very nice message. Thank you very much, Dave.
And I need to put a shout out to Vic Falloon. He's been watching the Armchair Airshow this afternoon. Now, Vic used to work at Biggin Hill for about 20 years, managing and servicing all of the navigation equipment here. So the ILS that's at the end of the runway that helps pilots land by sole use of their instrumentation, and also looking after the VOR over here and other areas around the airfield. Of course, also the radio transmission aerials on top of the control tower. Okay, well, let's not remember that this show wouldn't be able to be put on without our sponsors and our supporters, and here's one from Biggin Hill.
Hello, I'm David Winstanley, CEO of London Biggin Hill Airport, and it's my distinct pleasure and honour to be able to host the Airability Armchair Airshow. You're going to hear a lot of wonderful people talking about an amazing charity, and London Biggin Hill are honoured to be the first host of the Airability Armchair Airshow. You're going to hear remarkable stories about how the skies aren't the limit and how Airability open up the passion that we all enjoy in this industry. London Biggin Hill Airport are honoured to host this year, and we hope it's a relationship that we can build with Airability year on year, and that Biggin Hill will become the spiritual home of Airability.
A very interesting couple of minutes, that past 20 minutes or so. And putting this all together, it just proves it is a live show, and we're doing our very best to hang it. Terrific action and just the most beautiful day. And I wish we could have had thousands of people with us today, but it was not to be. But we were talking about the Grob 109, and in particular, a reference to Project Able. Now, this sounds to me a game changer, and I'm delighted to be joined by Shona Bowman, who is the chairman of the trustees. Is this truly a game-changing moment, taking the charity on a new bound, Shona?
Absolutely, George. It's going to make such a big difference to the way Airability can operate into the future. We're hoping that with a fleet of adapted aircraft, we really can become UK-wide. We can regionalise, we can send aircraft out to flying clubs and schools around the country and really bring disabled flying into everybody's local area.
Fantastic. Now, I've been kicking around Airability maybe 12, 15 years now. You've been with it from the beginning. You and Mike Miller-Smith go back a very long way. Where would you like to see it be in 10 years' time? What sort of direction, vision do you have?
I think really I'd just love to see disabled aviation normalised. I'd love to see aeroplanes being flown all over the country, maybe, you know, let's think big, all over the world with disabled pilots, and it just being normal. And then that's going to happen with adapted aircraft and with a bit of open skies thinking. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Brilliant. Well, let's not forget to get the charity there. Of course, we need everybody's help to do that. And we've mentioned what's going on online on the auction. I gather that Red One flying suit needs a bit of a boost. So I think Tom Bold will be a little upset if we don't get some extra bidders for that as well. But right in front of me here, the model, the SU-27, signed by Anatoly. This blade, for example, things like that. There's a whole range of different things that you can bid for on the auction site. But with our focus currently on the charity and Project Able in particular, we very kindly have a message from, nonetheless, the Secretary of State for the Department of Transport, himself, Grant Shapps.
It's an absolute pleasure to join you today and to welcome viewers from around the world. Inevitably, the UK Airshow calendar has been much disrupted over the past year. But it takes more than a pandemic to discourage the team at Airability. And for the second year in succession, they've done an incredible job staging this Armchair Airshow. So us aviation enthusiasts can indulge our passion all without leaving our sitting rooms, or study in my case. Airability deserves massive credit for this, and not just for organising today's programme, from Biggin Hill's magnificent Spitfires to the Red Arrows and Fireflies, but also for providing another opportunity to raise thousands of pounds for charity to help more disabled people experience the joy of flying and aircraft for themselves. And there's no feeling quite like it. Nothing else gives you the same sense of freedom or has the potential to boost self-confidence. And if you have a disability that restricts you in your daily life, that prevents you from doing things that other people take for granted, then flying a plane can be hugely liberating and empowering. But as the only UK charity offering this service, I know there's a considerable waiting list for Airability flights. When I was chair of the all-party parliamentary group on general aviation, we lobbied the MOD and authorities to get hangared aircraft back in the air where they belong. And last year, I was absolutely delighted to help fulfill that dream by providing a charitable grant to refurbish the fleet of Vigilant T1 gliders from the RAF to significantly increase Airability's capacity. Airability will keep 8 aircraft for its own use and sell the remaining ones to bolster funds for the charity. And this means it can help around 1,600 more disabled people a year enjoy the transformational benefits of flying on top of the current 1,000 or so. Now, I must stress, though, that this isn't just about providing a fun and exciting experience. It's also about encouraging disabled people into aviation jobs. Many of our best pilots started flying in a glider at a local airfield, and in fact, it was my first experience in the air as a scout when I was taken up in a glider from Lasham. And this sparked an interest which has led to me gaining my pilot's license and making aviation a lifelong passion for me. And it's through general aviation that many other aviation careers begin, in engineering, air traffic control, and numerous other support functions. There's simply no better way to learn the ropes. So in 2019, we launched the Reach for the Sky campaign to inspire a new, more diverse generation to join the industry. And people from all backgrounds, including disabled people. And so Airability's work has the real potential to contribute to that campaign, to change lives, and to benefit wider aviation. I know how difficult the past 15 months have been for aviation. Airability's aircraft have been grounded and fundraising has been difficult. But today represents a real hope for the future. In the months ahead, as our vaccination program is fully rolled out, we can look forward to the safe return of general aviation, and Airability can continue doing its wonderful work. So thanks to our army of armchair viewers for tuning in today. Thanks to everyone who's made the air show possible, and please have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Okay, well, I am stood in front of the Airability Cherokee. Now, we saw Sophie take to the air earlier in the aircraft, and they have just taxied back. It's not staged. They have just shut the engine down. Sophie, my first question to you is, how was that?
Absolutely fantastic. So I haven't been up for 18 months, and it couldn't have been better. Flying conditions were wonderful. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Had a great flight, and can't wait to get up there again. And yeah, all thanks to Airability for allowing me to give that, or giving me that sense of freedom in the skies. And yeah, couldn't encourage people more to come and have a go.
Oh, that's lovely words, Sophie. Now, I want to ask the obvious question. What does Airability mean to you, Sophie?
Well, I think Airability has given me, as I mentioned, that sense of freedom, not only in the skies, but also giving me a sense of freedom in terms of being able to have a go at anything. You know, I've got problems with my sight and thought that might be an issue, but the minute I arrived, Airability just said, yep, no problems, we'll find a way, we'll give it a go, and still developing some software to make it easier for me to fly. And yeah, they're not afraid of anything, so willing to try anything to make it easier. So.
Well, what wonderful words. And if that's not good enough encouragement for you, if you have a disability or perhaps somebody you know, a member of your family, to just give it a go, back to the studio.
A bit more of the Cold War now, where John took another visit to speak to somebody who's been very, very fast, both in the air and on the ground.
Well, welcome everybody to the Royal Air Force Museum at Hendon in London. And I'm here today with Wing Commander Andy Green, OBE, and we're stood in front of the mighty McDonnell Douglas Phantom FGR-2 XV424, an aircraft which saw a distinguished service in the Royal Air Force. And Andy is going to tell us all about this aircraft. So Andy, welcome to the Armchair Airshow. And what does it feel like to be stood in front of an aircraft that you actually flew?
brilliant to be back here and see this absolute monster. I mean, the F4 had all sorts of nicknames. It was known variously as the lead sled, the double ugly, or my favourite, which was the bent wing monster jet, because it had the bent up wingtips, which is a unique feature. But it actually was also the most extraordinary aeroplane to fly. You know, it was known as the monster jet for lots of reasons, including the fact it was hard to handle. It had some very quirky aerodynamics. It didn't have conventional ailerons that go up and down to control the roll on the wings. It had down-going ailerons and up-going spoilers, which, going high speed in a straight line, worked perfectly. Really, really crisp response. At high angles of attack, when you were turning hard or at slow speed, the up-going spoiler would come up into the broken air over the top of the wing. I mean, to give you some idea, at 19 units, which was the maximum, optimum angle of attack, so you're just about at the stall at that stage, the whole of the top of the wing was stalled. So if you started dumping fuel, the fuel would start at the back of the wing and recirculate to the front edge. It was all completely broken away. To warn you, you were approaching 19 units and getting near the manoeuvre limit. There was a vibrator in the, literally an off-centre weight on the left-hand foot pedal in the front cockpit, the rudder pedal, which would start vibrating at 15 units. It's known as the pedal shaker. Almost none of us felt it in the air at 19 units, because although the rudder pedal was trying to shake your leg off, the whole airframe was shaking just as hard. So physically, it was hard work. And by the time I got to the front line in the late 1980s, low-level air defence in Germany, we would do mixed fighter force operations with the F-16s. Initially, I had no idea why the F-16s would actually bother with this big, hulking, great 1960s aeroplane. Why were they following us around? This aeroplane did everything, quite literally. 5,500 built, one of the biggest production runs for a jet fighter ever, and it did everything from close air support of troops on the ground through to air intercept, conventional bombing, reconnaissance, nuclear, even air-to-air refueling, the lot. It was an extraordinary airframe. Late 80s, the aeroplane was still more than holding its own because it brought unique capabilities as part of a mixed fighter force and as part of NATO's air defence.
So what we'll do now is we're going to have a walk around this aircraft, Andy, and you're going to tell us all about the bits and bobs, you know, why those, why we see what we see here, a real work of art. So we'll go and have a look around the aircraft. So Andy, we're now at the business end of the aircraft. We're going to get up close and personal to this jet. So talk us through what we can see here. This really does look like a huge engine.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons this was known as such a beast. They're two thumping great engines, and of course the British Phantoms, the ones we bought from McDonnell Douglas, were re-engined with the Rolls-Royce Spey. A lot more power, so we had over 20,000 pounds of thrust per side. Structurally, the airframe was incredibly strong. It did almost give you the sense that if you ran out of missiles, you could go and ram somebody, because it was such a meaty aeroplane. The other thing you'll notice, of course, being designed for carrier operations, it's got this enormous carrier hook. All fast jets have some sort of arrestor hook. 20 tons of high-speed metal landing on a runway, you will run out of runway really, really quickly. So you literally would slam into the cable. It would bring you up really short. Let the airplane roll back. Put the brakes on very gently so you didn't tip the airplane back. Very gently, in fact, as it rolled back, a little bit of thrust to stop it. Pull the lever back up, and the hook would go up, and you just drive away like nothing happened.
But we can't let you go today, Andy, without just sharing with us a few of your treasured memories of that wonderful time in 1997 when you became the world land speed record holder. So tell us your memories of that memorable day.
A fantastic project to be involved in. I mean, I was amazingly lucky not only to have the world's best day job flying for the Royal Air Force, flying beasts like this mighty Phantom, but also to have the world's best holiday job working with Richard Noble, an incredible bunch of world-class engineers to design and build and run the world's fastest car. Technology I was used to. We actually took two engines from the Phantom. So we actually had two Spey engines built into a race car. The world's fastest, most extraordinary straight-line racing car. 1997, we got out to the Black Rock Desert in Nevada, took that car ultimately to a two-way average within 1 hour. So an average of 763 was comfortably supersonic, and the thrust supersonic car had done what it said on the tin. It had got the world's first and still only supersonic world land speed record.
Well, here, Andy. And of course, you're now looking ahead to Bloodhound. We know that project is, very much, moving forwards. And the plan is to, of course, try and break that 1,000 mile an hour mark.
We are hoping to get that restarted, but of course, we having got the car up to 600 plus miles an hour, it's over 1,000 kilometres an hour 18 months ago. That was the proving point for, yes, it's actually at least as fast, if not faster than we were expecting. Now's the time to fit the rocket motor as well and get it up into supersonic speeds and start pushing up to find out how fast it will really go.
And it's so nice to see this aircraft, Andy, and to hear you talking about the Phantom with just such fondness, because it's earned its place in history with the Royal Air Force. So, Andy, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts and your memories about a wonderful machine, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure, thank you.
Well, fabulous there. Such a juxtaposition to go from Cold War jets to live action outside and then to heritage aviation as well. It's been a fantastic afternoon. I hope you're enjoying it despite some few little hiccups along the way this afternoon. And thank you all so much for your messages. We've had so many shout outs that I don't think we've got the chance to put them all in. But please, please do keep tracking the auction website and, of course, the donation page and everything else as well. Well, now, every aviator through the course of his career has to interface with one very important individual and organisation, and that of course is air traffic control. And therein lies a whole nother story about interlinking airability with the wider aviation world. And it's a real pleasure now. I'm joined by Brian Wheeler, who's not only from that organisation of air traffickers, of course the National Air Traffic Services, NATS, but is also a trustee of Airability. Good afternoon, Brian.
Hello, George. How are you?
Extremely well. A real pleasure to have you on board today. Brian, can you give us a flavour as to how your organisation first got involved with the charity?
We're going back many years now, and actually our trades union, Prospect Trades Union, were the first group, I suppose, from the company to become involved with Airability. And we bought an aircraft as a company for Airability, and we now have three, if I've got that right, on live stream, three trustees of Airability who work for NATS.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And it's a longer, it's a story that continues now, isn't it, through the entire senior management of your organisation. It's a fantastic opportunity. How do you see it progressing from here on?
Well, I think there will be a link with NATS and Airability forevermore. At least I certainly hope so. And as you've just alluded to, from the most senior positions in the company, NATS provide support to Airability and will continue to do so for many, many years to come, which is great.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's just pause for a moment because I know we've got a very good video coming up, and then I'll come back to you. So let's roll that NATS VT right now. Well, absolutely fascinating video there. I mean, extraordinary the work that does go on. Brian, I can't help but think that watching that, British airspace is pretty full up. Is that the case?
Yeah, most definitely, George. I mean, not so much right now, unfortunately, but that video was actually filmed. That was taken from live radar in 2014, and it got busier than that. So 2019 was much busier. Currently, due to the pandemic, we're seeing about 23 to 25% of that amount of aircraft in the skies. And at the height of the pandemic, sadly, we were down at 10, 11% of commercial air traffic. But it is, without doubt, the busiest and most complex airspace in the world.
Just before we go, I know you're hugely involved in the charity, but from a NATS perspective, in terms of manning and people applying and whatever, is this a struggle for you now to man all this extra activity? How is it going?
No, so actually it's obviously less aeroplanes means less sectors open, so you deploy less staff. So and our COVID protocols have meant that in order to keep our staff safe, which obviously is a priority for us as a company, we've reduced the footfall. But we've already begun training our controllers. They've been through simulations because, as everybody who's watching this will know, skill fade is a very real thing for everybody involved in the aviation industry. And we've worked really, really hard to make sure that our controllers are ready for when the traffic comes back. And hopefully, that's not going to be too long.
Well, Brian Wheeler, thank you so much for joining us. A really fascinating insight, not only to your connection with the charity, but of course your own professional endeavours as well. Now, something extraordinary has happened during the course of that videotape we've just been watching, because Lingy has invited a few mates into the studio, would you believe? Now, he happened to have been an air cadet here. This is his home territory. Perhaps, Mike, you can explain just what's going on.
Well, indeed, George, I'm joined by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cadets from 2427 Biggin Hill Squadron, and also Airability's very own Wilbur the Bear. And I think the cadets have got a couple of microphones and mischievous grins on their faces, which means they've got some tricky questions to ask all three of us. They're not just asking me, they're asking all three of us difficult questions. Is that right, guys? That's right. Okay, so who's going to start? Is it worth in fact, we'll just pass the microphones along and introduce ourselves. So for COVID measures, the guys are in a bubble, so they have been in a bubble for a while, and they are sharing the same microphone. So if you can introduce yourself, Corporal on this side, and then work along.
So I'm Corporal Langham, and
I'm Cadet Welch.
Sergeant Sampson.
Cadet Valdez.
Cadet Howard.
Corporal Hildreth.
Cadet Christie.
Thank you very much. And it was 3 of these guys yesterday I actually met up with at Cudham Cemetery, which is just down the road from here. Now, of course, during the Battle of Britain, RAF Biggin Hill was a very, very important place as a sector station. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission and the Air Cadets, as part of the 80th anniversary of the Air Cadets, have got together for a project in which they're really challenging cadets to go and research some of the graves at their local cemetery. So I met with 3 of these guys yesterday, and we did a little piece for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and it was a fantastic afternoon and very insightful. I'm sure you'll agree, guys, that we learnt a lot, and we saw 5 graves, some of which were very, very poignant, in that one of them, in fact, was one of the first casualties of the Battle of Britain in 1940. Right, so I think it's over to the fun time of the next few minutes, and we've got some difficult questions. Who's going to go first?
Wow.
Go for it.
what would you say is your least favourite aircraft that you've either flown or that has ever been produced, and why?
Least favourite. We had a question online about a least favourite airshow as well, which I don't want to answer because I haven't got a least favourite airshow. Least favourite aeroplane that I've flown and why? I'm going to be totally honest here and say that I love the Cessna 150 or 152. I did my very first solo in it. In fact, I had one 2 summers ago to commute to work to and from in. And it's probably the least favourite of everything I've flown. It's probably the Cessna 150. I love it still, but if there was a scale, I'd put Cessna at the bottom of it. I don't know about you guys. George?
Well, it is tricky, but you know, I don't know that I'd want to have a least favourite because I'd always want to go flying in something every day. But I have to say, yes, probably the Cessna 152. I've probably got to share that similarity with you. But actually, I'd just rather be flying anyway, John.
Well, for me, Cessna 150, 152, Tomahawk, it's probably the smell, because they're quite old and they've had a few first-time flyers in them. But I think to have flown, now I'm probably going to get chastised for this. The Tiger Moth is a handful. You know, you do this and it sort of keeps flying in a straight line, but perhaps for good reason. It was a training aircraft. It was meant to, you know, teach you those really difficult handling skills to fly the wartime machine. So I think character-wise, Tiger Moth, no. Handling-wise, maybe.
There you go. So, good answer. Right, who's got the next question for us?
Who would you say is the best pilot out of you three?
Me.
Who's the best pilot?
Yeah, it has to be because he's never been in the military.
Yeah, okay. We've got a civilian pilot.
Self-taught.
We've got an Army, a Royal Air Force and British Army pilot, and then, of course, Royal Air Force pilot. Wilbur, you're probably the best pilot out of this bunch here. Would you agree with that? I think so. Go on then, Sergeant.
So I was just wondering, and it could be an opportunity or a piece of advice or maybe an experience, but what in your careers would you say that you're most thankful for?
Well, I'm going to actually answer that first, which was when I talked earlier about nearly joining the Army. I'm most thankful for the call I got 2 days from joining the Army, when I got a call from the careers office down the road in Chatham, who'd been my school's liaison officer, who's heard that I was going in the Army. He phoned me up and personally, the flight attendant said, "What are you doing going in the Army? Come down to my office this afternoon and have an interview." And then about 3 weeks later, I was at Cranwell. And then about 2 months after that, I was in the Air Force training, on my officer training. So that phone call was my definite thankful moment.
Dodged quite a bullet there, didn't you, sir?
Yeah, I did. Well, I don't know about dodging a bullet. You've been in the Army, George. How, would you say that was a good move?
I've dodged many bullets, yes, whilst you've been cruising around at 30,000 feet. I have indeed. But it's really, really interesting, the catalyst to change and how we got into the careers we have. For me, I've got to be thankful, really, for somebody, and I won't mention his name, who actually created the challenge. It was a conversation that almost it went the way that I wasn't perhaps quite right or fit to do that particular career. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. And that turned into a lifelong passion for me. And without being given that stimulus, I don't think I would have met the challenge. And goodness me, it was a turning point. And I'm very glad that I took the challenge up. John.
Well, I don't come from a military background. I have a passion for aviation, which has taken me into my career. So I'm a director of a defence technology company, and I've, I think we all struggle to believe in ourselves sometimes. I would say perseverance and resilience will look after you, regardless of whatever career you go into. I think just trust yourself, trust your judgment, trust those around you, and you'll be surprised what you can achieve.
There we go.
What would your best piece of advice be for an aspiring pilot?
I think the best piece of advice that I have used myself, which was given to me, was just take everything one step at a time. You know, I aspired from 3 years old to be a Red Arrows pilot, but you've got to take every step as it comes. You can't just start from day one and be a Red Arrows pilot. So I think from just concentrating on the job at hand, learning to fly that first aeroplane, and then the more experienced you become and the harder it becomes, then just take it each step at a time. And I think that goes throughout flying training. You don't want to think about your final nav test before you've even done your first solo. So I just take it one step at a time. Good question.
Yes, always stick with the passion. You know, go with your passion, stick with it. You know, I've seen people through and different things. Funnily enough, flying wasn't my first choice. I always wanted to be a broadcaster and music. I spent a lot of time in music and sitting on my own. But actually, when you get there, even though you may fail at certain hurdles, there are still other ways to achieve success. If that is your passion, stick with it. And as John says, have the resilience to see it through. And it takes hard work and commitment, but stay with it.
I would say try and open every door. Surround yourself with other people that you have an interest with. I came up to Biggin Hill when I was very young, got rides in aeroplanes, got talking to pilots that, you know, where I wanted to be. So I would just, you know, put yourself in places and positions that would allow you to move forwards with the environment and the people that are around you. So, you know, turn up to your local airfield and help out. There's some flying schools up here, you know, and, you know, you just use the Air Cadets as well, of course. It's a great network for you to, you know, forward your passion. Great question.
Who inspired you to be a pilot?
Who inspired me to be a pilot? It was the Red Arrows here at Biggin Hill, watching when I was from 1 year old all the way up to the day I joined the Royal Air Force. I came to the Biggin Hill Airfair here at the airfield here and watched the Red Arrows, and also Ray Hanna, who was a very famous former Red Arrows leader. He used to close the Biggin Hill Airfair in his Mark 9 Spitfire MH434, and just gave such a jaw-dropping display. You could have heard a pin drop in the crowd here and just listened to the music of the engine here at Biggin Hill, which is obviously so very, very poignant. So it was, Red Arrows and Ray Hanna for me.
Do you know, Lingy, this is spooky because it was exactly the same. Okay, I lived just a few miles down here. As you mentioned earlier on, I was born near Croydon, the old Croydon Airport, and my very first air show was here, and I will never ever forget that first solo Spitfire. You know, the closing act from Ray Hanna. That was truly inspirational, emotional, and that's what kicks off the passion. And I'll never forget it.
Simple answer. A chap by the name of Ben Harris. We were air cadets together at 228 Bromley Squadron, and I must have been about 16 years old when his dad was taking me up in his Oster from Biggin Hill. Ben got his pilot's license at 17, took me up as passenger, and that was it. I was hooked. So a fellow air cadet friend.
What has been your favourite thing about being a pilot?
My favourite thing about being a pilot has to be the opportunities I've been given. I've been very lucky in 10 years with the Red Arrows to go all over the world, and I've been to some absolutely incredible places. You know, displaying in New York Harbour was definitely a brilliant, brilliant experience. So the opportunities I've been given are definitely the best thing for me.
I think we need to move on. We have a prompt, sadly, to...
Can I just do one thing then, in that case?
Yeah.
Of course, we've got some cadets here. We're very thankful for them coming across to speak to us. I'm sorry you can't get your question in the end there. It's also worth shout out to the adult volunteers, so the staff who work with the cadets to give them the opportunities that the organisation gives. It's not just uniformed volunteers. There are actually civilian instructors at each squadron, and he doesn't know this is about to happen, but I've just been asked to present this, which is a certificate of appointment. I hereby appoint you, Jonathan Michael Windover, to be an honorary civilian instructor to number 2427 Biggin Hill Squadron of the Air Training Corps.
Well,
so
I didn't expect that.
You are now an honorary civilian instructor of Biggin Hill Squadron. So thank you, guys.
Well,
round of applause.
Well done. Fantastic.
Cheers.
There you go. Guys and girls, thank you very much for coming on. Some brilliant questions. Thank you, Wilbur, for hosting. And keep up the good work. And please do look into some of the local graves for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Cheers.
Well, it's truly inspirational. There's nothing better than engaging with the youth of today and to give them an opportunity to learn from us to go forward. I mean, in many ways, we've been so fortunate, all three of us, and many, many others I can think of, in the excitement and exploration of being in the air. It's a fantastic achievement. We're trying to do that with disabled people as well and give them the same passion and inspiration and motivation to make the most of their lives as well. To do that, of course, we need your help, and we've already mentioned it, the auction site and the donate button, and of course, the Triumph motorcycle. Now, we haven't mentioned that a great deal, and John, perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this really is an amazing opportunity to own a one-off. This is a motorbike produced by Triumph, the Triumph Bonneville, and it has original components from a Spitfire. £20 for the ticket, and it's not just the bike you could own, it's also a flight in a two-seat Spitfire from Duxford. So, you know, see if you can get those tickets and maybe it could be yours.
Yeah, well, I'd certainly love to own that and do many other things, but we've still got a tremendous amount of exciting content in this show to go this afternoon. And it's very much the Lingy show for the next few minutes, because he can tell us about stuff that he is engaged with in his own company. So, Lingy, tell us all about what's coming up next.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about what I've been doing over the winter. So obviously the day job is flying the little extra 300 for the Blades Aerobatic team. It's my full-time job. But of course, there's not been a huge amount of business over the pandemic restricted times for that to occur. We can't fly passengers during the lockdown, and we've not been doing any air shows, sadly. So to make myself more useful to the company, the Blades are owned by 2XL Aviation, our parent company. They also have a lot of other departments, and one of them is the oil spill response. So you may have seen on previous air shows the 727, the oil spill response limited 727 operated by 2XL. And we've got a bit of footage which was taken on a recent training sortie. So this one taking off is actually a PA-31 Navajo, and that's a spotter aircraft called UKCS, which stands for the United Kingdom Continental Shelf. That is a spotter aircraft, twin-engine, piston-engined aeroplane with a camera mounted to the front and a systems operator down the back to operate the camera and the other surveillance, the other systems, with a single pilot And I've been flying this as part of 2XL, not just in the oil spill response capacity, but also for the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, counter pollution, fisheries patrol. There you can see the Navajo, now the PA-31, joining up with the 727. This is a very specific task, so that the 727 on constant readiness to respond to a oil spill worldwide has been modified by our in-house design team at 2XL to have a aerial spray dispersant system, which we'll see very shortly. And this has clearance from the Civil Aviation Authority to operate very low and very slow. This is a very vintage airliner, 3-engined airliner, the 727, and they've been given clearance to fly at 150 feet at 150 knots to deliver this spray system. And the role of the spotter aircraft, that UKCS, is to fly behind, or actually to go out ahead and find the spill to direct the 727 in, and then to monitor the spray, which you can see now. There's the spray coming out of the Tersis system. That will go over the oil slick to then disperse the oil spill. It's filmed from the Navajo for the camera, the systems operator in the back of the Navajo operating the camera. You can see there the shadow. Look how low that aircraft is. The nose is very high. It's at a very high angle of attack for the slow speed it's flying. And an incredible thing to see from the air when you're flying next to it in a PA-31. Very low, very slow. And a very unique aeroplane. There aren't many 727s left in the world, and 2XL operate a pair of them on behalf of Oil Spill Response Limited to deliver that aerial spray dispersant. So that's one of the jobs I've been doing. Other than that, we've been over the sea in other Navajos, conducting a variety of tasks for the Maritime Coast Guard Agency 24/7 as part of 2XL Aviation. So that's what I've been up to over the winter. But now, summer is coming. Restrictions are hopefully getting lifted. I'm back in the cockpit of my beloved Extra 300.
Oh, fantastic. I hope you're, where are we? We're over in this camera, one here. You can imagine how much activity is going on in this studio. It's very bespoke and a great deal of fun. We mentioned at the Triumph Bonneville, but of course don't forget the auction site and the donation button as well. But something a little more exciting also coming up next, I think, John. You've been playing with Cold War beasts again, haven't you?
I have indeed, George, yes. Well, they say lightning never strikes twice. Well, at the Armchair Airshow, it is this afternoon. And I was very lucky to catch up with the Royal Air Force's last operational Lightning pilot. We're here at the Gatwick Aviation Museum, just next to Gatwick Airport in Surrey. This started off as a private collection of aircraft in 1987, but it's now a museum open to the public. On one of those exhibits is the English Electric Lightning F-53. Now, this aircraft saw service in the Royal Air Force for 29 years and really was a Cold War warrior. The aircraft was the UK's only Mach 2 interceptor built and designed in the UK, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Ian Black. Ian, welcome to the Armchair Airshow. Now, Ian, just stood in front of this aircraft. It's intimidating. What was it like for you when you turned up on the OCU that day?
Intimidating. and I was lucky because I'd done maybe 1 or 2 flights in the Lightning as a passenger. And I'd come from the Hawk, but nothing prepares you for the fact that when you get in this, you've actually got to fly it. It's all very well sitting in a Lightning and having a passenger flight, but when you're sitting in a Lightning, particularly with an instructor next to you, or right next to you, closer than we are now, it all becomes very intimidating. It's not like a little Harrier.
Yeah. Now, no question, this aircraft is a masterpiece of engineering, but it was designed in the 1950s, so an analog cockpit, and of course this aircraft has incredible performance. Now, from a piloting perspective, you had to be on your game, didn't you?
You did, and in various ways. I mean, one thing which was very important was instrument flying. So you definitely had to be on your game. You had to be on your game in terms of fuel management, because it burned fuel. Once you started the engines, you could watch the fuel gauges and they would just sort of, before your very eyes, they would start trickling down. But the way I look at the Lightning is it's probably the only aircraft in the sort of 80s still flying then that had a soul. And anything that came after the Lightning had no soul as far as I'm concerned. It was full of electric switches and fly-by-wire. Once you connected the electrical power to this, it was like a big umbilical cord that gave it its heart. Yeah. And then once you press the start buttons and the engines rotated, it was alive. And you were like taking a huge panther down a high street on a very, very short lead. And once you let the brakes off, the thing was just going. You didn't have to put power on to taxi. You let the brakes off, the power was at idle, and it was off. It was a beast to fly.
Now, we know the Lightning for its remarkable rate of climb and of course its speed and its ceiling. Just give us some of your your memories of how the Lightning was as a performer?
Well, I think the Lightning has become a bit of a legend in its own lunchtime, really. And there are pilots out there who went to allegedly 80,000 feet and Mach 2.5 and all that sort of stuff. But the reality was that it was limited to 675 knots without the probe on. And I think it was 625 knots with the probe on, but for very good reasons. Because if you flew at 600 knots in the Lightning, you knew you were doing 600 knots. The noise, the feeling, the feedback it gave you, the fact you're in full reheat, the fact that the fuel gauges were literally disappearing before your very eyes, it just gave you that impression. Seat of the pants flying at its best. Seat of the pants flying really, people talk about a tiger moth or seat of the pants, but this was, Mach 2 seat of the pants.
Yeah.
So it would go very fast, it would go very high. Personally, and I think I speak for most of the guys who flew at the end of the Lightning, not many of us went above 60,000 feet, which sounds a bit blasé, but we didn't go up to 70,000 feet or 75,000 feet, but it would happily perform at heights above 60,000 feet. I remember myself and one of the other junior pilots, we were doing formation, not close formation, but battle turns at 55,000 feet. And if you think about that probably could with a Typhoon, but in a Tornado, there's no way you could do stuff like that. So it was still very impressive.
So tell us about the job that the Lightning had to perform for the Royal Air Force.
As a Cold War interceptor, it was perfect because it would take off from the UK airspace, it would accelerate very quickly, it could pick up the radar contact maybe around about 20-25 miles on something like a Bear, and then you'd be taking out your mission to intercept it. I think in the 2 and a bit years I was in the Lightning, I never got scrambled for a live intercept. In terms of intercepts, I mean, every sortie in the Lightning was exciting. So every single mission we did, something happened. There was never a mission where you went off and just bimbled around and came back and went, yeah, that was good fun. You either had some sort of emergency. I had a couple of things where a panel just fell out on my lap one time. It hadn't been screwed in properly. I had a fire once. I had a chute fall off. I had a parachute depart on taxiing out. I had a tyre that burst on landing on a strong crosswind. I saw my wingman catch fire and eject. So, that was in 2.5 years. So every mission had some sort of element of danger to it, I suppose.
I suppose you're certainly heightening the level of risk, aren't you, by getting in one of these things. But Ian, thank you very much for getting us up close and personal to the Lightning. And we'll see you soon.
Right, cheers, John. Thank you.
I've just got to remind everybody about the text to donate service we have operating. So if you please text FLY5 to 70490, that will donate £5 to the very brilliant Airability. If you want to donate more, then just put that amount after the word fly. So fly 10 will donate £10 to 70490.
Well, thanks, Lingy. Yes, and a very apt reminder that is as well. We're over here at the moment. And of course, the other thing is a reminder of the number of people that have helped us mount this. You can see we're here in Hangar 2 at London Biggin Hill Airport, and tremendous support there. David Winstanley, obviously Colin Hitchins and Hannah Gray as well. But don't let's forget Aerobites, mainstream headline sponsor of Aerability, and a big shout out there to our friends, the Foresters. But Bombardier, very focused here. Breitling, of course, we've mentioned as well. Hayward's Aviation, always at the root of all this, and you'll see on the side of the Airability airplanes there now mentioned there. Nats, we were talking to Brian Wheeler just a bit earlier on. R5 air displays. Now, we're going to be talking to Charles Sciarra in about 10 minutes' time about the organisation of air displays, and of course the Jet MS and RS Group. But right now, relatively new to our family, although we've known the people involved, here's a word about Orien.
My name is Edwin Bredikmeyer. I'm the CEO and founder of Oriens Aviation. We are the exclusive Pilatus and now Tecnam distributor for the British Isles, including Ireland, based here at Biggin Hill Airport in Kent. And I've been flying from Biggin Hill since 1994. Very passionate aviator, been flying all my life. And first started flying when I was 14 and then got my license when I was 17. And of course, I will always remember the first time I flew. I am really passionate about bringing the joys of aviation to other people and to people who maybe in some ways are less fortunate than myself. And I'd love to give them the experience to fly. And I'm enormously passionate about what Airability are doing, enabling everyone and all manner of people to be able to fly an airplane is just quite astonishing. Biggin Hill have been hugely supportive of everything we've done. They've always supported us in our choice of facility, our location on the airfield, helping us to promote what we're doing, promote our aircraft, helping us to introduce us to apprentices who want to work in maintenance or anything at all. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with Biggin Hill. And very humbled and grateful that we are able to support Airability today.
Well, Edwin, thank you very much for your help and support. The whole team at Airability and all those that we support really does benefit from organisations such as yourself, giving your help to what we do. It really is a community effort, something that we do together with the aviation community. So once again, thank you, Edwin, for joining us at the Armchair Airshow, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now we're going to go outside to our roving reporter Liz McConaughey, who's talking to probably one of the better known Airability aviators, Neil Tucker. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, George. Yep, I'm outside in our PA-28 that you saw Sophie flying in early today. And I am joined with Neil, as George said, who is one of our flyers at Airability. So first of all, Neil, if you want to tell the viewers exactly what your injury is.
Hi guys, so I've got no left leg, I have amputee in the left leg, and my left arm is paralysed. So that's my main injury really, involved in a motorcycle accident in 2014.
Fabulous. Well, not fabulous,
Not
but
fabulous, thanks.
it's good to tell everyone. Do you want a hand? We always have a bit of banter, don't we? So the next question, Neil, really is what challenges do you come across when you climb into this aircraft to actually fly?
Well, the biggest issue is that every aircraft is different. So my medical says that I've got to be checked on every different type of aircraft that I fly. And everyone poses a different challenge, even from getting in or getting underneath it to check the fuel. But my main challenge is coming into land. You know, you're getting close to the ground, and that's unhealthy if you're uncontrolled. So I've got one arm, which has got to control my control column here. It's got to control my throttle, my flaps, my trim, my press to transmit. So I've got the one arm dance, what we call the one arm dance, and that goes on, and it's quite challenging. But thanks to Aerability's training, I seem to be doing it reasonably well so far.
Well, that's yet to be judged because you haven't taken me flying yet, have you? But he does promise that he's going to take me flying. Well, how do you feel about lockdown lifting and getting yourself back in the air?
Well, it's really great, actually. I think that, speaking from my experience, I spent 6 months in a hospital bed in a single room in solitary confinement, and it just gave me a taste of what it was like for a lot of disabled people to be in lockdown. A lot of disabled people are in wheelchairs pretty much permanently, or they're in a room, and they experience lockdown every day without any respite. So I can totally understand how great it is to come back to the feeling of freedom. And I think that Airability is just a wonderful vehicle for people to experience and get back to the real world. So yeah, it's been a tough lesson, tough few years for us all, but disabled people really, I think, do it every day.
Yeah, and you're so right, Neil. Really, really good message to put out there. So Neil and I are going to head off now and steal a Spitfire. But while we do that, if we push back to the ladies on the sofa.
Thank you, Liz. That was a very good reintroduction for John and I. I've taken George's place on the sofa now, and we're going to talk about the auction. We've still got a few lots that haven't really been bid on recently. We've got the flying suit from the Red Arrow signed by the 2017 team. Now, it's worth pointing out it's not Tom Bowles' suit at all. It's actually Wing Commander David Montenegro's suit, and it's signed by the 2017 team. And if you look on the website for the auction, armchairairshow.com, you'll see that suit was actually the one that Monty, now Red 11, the officer commanding of the Red Arrows, was wearing when we got a fabulous shot of the 9 jets over Petra in Jordan. And that's the team that has signed that suit. So please go online and have a look at that. We've got some shout-outs coming in as well. A good friend of mine, Jen Tai, has written in to say a shout-out to Harvey, who's watching and making his own English Electric Lightning out of cardboard after seeing the Beast this afternoon and falling in love with it. So well done, Harvey. Fantastic effort. John, we've got another shout out here for a Biggin Hill firefighter who's Matthew Hunt, but he's also a flex-wing microlight pilot. So it's great to see some flying action today in these uncertain times of COVID. Keep up the good work. He would love to have been at Biggin, but unfortunately he's on Green Watch, so he's got 2 days rest.
Good.
Thank you for your messages. Now, John, over to you.
Thank you, Lingy. Yes, well, so we talk about inspiration here at Airability, but obviously it's not just necessarily the disabled people that are inspiring some of you out there that might feel that you want to get in the air. It's also the ladies. There's a lot of ladies in aviation, and I caught up with Patty Wagstaff, 3 times US National Aerobatic Champion, and also represented the US on the World Championship stage. Also, I met Jessica Cox, the world's first licensed armless pilot, also happens to be a black belt in Taekwondo and enjoys scuba diving, and our very own Liz. And I caught up with those guys a couple of weeks ago, and here's what we had to say.
I'm going to do a quick fire questions now, and I'm going to start with Patty, and then I'll go to Liz and Jessica. So, Patty, scariest moment in the cockpit?
I haven't had too many scary moments. It's mostly my sort of peaceful, safe place. But going cross country from airshow to airshow, and we're VFR only with our little airshow airplanes, and flying under the weather and seeing the ceilings come down lower and lower, and you start looking at roads and hoping you find an airport, especially in the early days without GPS, scariest moments for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Liz?
So mine have been shot at lots of times in Afghanistan, but ironically mine was when we flew into a set of high tension pylons up in Kajaki Dam in Afghanistan, and the cockpit glass came in over the pilot, so he lost control, and we thought we were going to actually crash. So that was my get my hand on my harness moment, get my go bag ready, thinking we were going to roll and have to climb out of the aircraft. But the left-hand seat recovered it at about 15 feet off the ground, so we managed to survive. But yeah, I'd take enemy fire over a set of wires any day.
Wow. So, Jessica, I'm hoping you'd ever been shot at in an airplane, but what was your most dramatic moment?
Well, I'm sure Liz and Patty have so many greater stories because they have a lot more hours than me. But I have had my first near miss here probably in the last the year, and I think that experience really reminded me about what happens up there, how careful you have to be, how aware you have to be. And there was an airplane that was maybe less than 100 feet or about 100 feet from me in the pattern, and that is really scary, especially when you're in the pattern. So for me, that near miss experience was probably my scariest thus far.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So okay, Patty, back to you. Now, this is an interesting one. Any challenges you found being a female in aviation?
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges being a female in aviation. For one, people don't always take you seriously, and it's like Jessica was saying, that they always think, she's the last person they think of that flew the plane in. It's kind of like that with women in general too. And then she gets a double whammy. So on the other hand, having a little extra challenge has been good for me. And I think for a lot of us, it kind of gives you something to prove and something to, it makes you want to be a little bit better maybe when you're a little, when you don't have everything going for you at first. So I've enjoyed the challenge of that. And it also gives me something to help other people aspire to.
Yeah, great to hear. Liz, now I know this is going to be a standard answer, is it?
No, mine's really simple. The only challenge really used to be flying suits. Flying suits are flat out designed for men. So every time you have to go for a toilet stop in a flying suit as a female, you always have the faff of trying to tie the arm sleeves round somewhere so they don't dangle into some toilet bowl somewhere. So I've had a whole career of trying to manage going to toilets all over the world whilst doing refuels and having to manage a flying suit. So note that aviators should have a female flying suit. It'd be much better.
Well, I'm sure the toilets in Afghanistan aren't particularly good, are they?
No, you don't want your arm sleeves dangling anywhere in there. So it's carefully managed.
Jessica.
Well, I'll just say something silly about flying with your feet and legs is sometimes you'll get a cramp or your foot will fall asleep. And that challenge is always entertaining because of you trying to figure out how am I going to make sure that my foot's awake for landing. So anyway, that's a unique challenge to myself, I'd say.
Well, ladies, look, thank you so much. I'd love to talk to you all day, but for now, thank you very much for joining us on the Armchair Airshow.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for having us.
Such inspiring stories, and unfortunately, if you see the tight crop on John's camera, then you'll see it says Lingy loves Rotary, and that's our good friend Liz who has done that as a little wind up for me this afternoon. But inspiring stories from Liz, from Patty and Jessica as well. Jessica came on last year for the Armchair Airshow. So inspiring, and it's all about disabled flying with Airability. So we need to raise more money. Please auction armchairairshow.com brilliant lots on there. You can come flying with me in my Blades aeroplane. Get bidding, please. Now we're going to go over to George as he stands by my very aeroplane.
And it's a real pleasure to do that. Do you mind if I nick it for an hour or so, Ling? It's a beautiful afternoon out there. But seriously, putting an air display together is a massive team effort. But it's got a couple of key leaders right at the centre of it. And to put an air display on, you need a flight display director. And he's a guy who's accredited to both the MAA and the CAA. And of course, we've been doing a bit of that this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined, first of all, by Charles Sciarra. Charles, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, George.
Now, what sort of challenges did you put together to make this happen for us this afternoon?
I have to say the weather's been the most difficult. I was sat at home last weekend thinking this just isn't going to go very well at all. We're very fortunate it's been great today, but in all seriousness, it's a it's a challenge. It's making that idea turn into reality and looking at the airspace we have. Biggin Hill is very, very congested with airspace above and to the sides as well, and then trying to make our display area fit for the pilots whilst keeping it safe for the public as well. And we've been a little bit coy and we've not released it to the fact that we're having live air displays today to mitigate against some of those factors, being probably one of the first displays of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky. And I was obviously behind the scenes throughout all of this and planning something that is live but not live and going online and therefore not open to the public. Very, very difficult indeed. But also alongside you, we'll maybe come back to you if you have a moment, Charles. Alongside me, Mike Stanway, who is the Flying Display Director for Cosford and also for Headcom. And I'm well aware of that, Mike. But COVID-19 environment, trying to run an air display this year, that's got to be tricky throughout the whole year, hasn't it? What's facing you?
Well, what's facing us is that we would normally have the Cosford Air Show in June, so in a couple of weeks' time. But we'd already decided to push it back because of the restrictions into September. And we're still having issues trying to find the main bits and pieces you need for an air show. Things like toilets and barriers and that sort of thing. A number of companies are no longer with us and don't turn up. The flying side, we don't know how many pilots are current and able to fly, where in normal years they would all be current and ready and the paperwork would be up to date and we'd know who we could get hold of. So it takes much more effort, and things that you don't perhaps think about in the first place is accommodation. Normally we would be accommodated in the Telford University, but of course in September they're all at university. So trying to find accommodation for the pilots is proving difficult. But from the flying point of view, once you get into it, it's an air display, and the paperwork and the way you run it makes no difference.
It is indeed. Now, putting them all together, very, very tricky. Very often I walk away because I do your job as well, and I think, how would I do that again? And let's go back to Charles for a moment. Charles, this is probably your first experience of doing it and integrating a flying display within an online production, which is broadcast worldwide. Any tips for doing this again next year?
Plan early. That's it. Yeah. Well, there's lots of lessons to be learned every time we do an air show anyway, and this one is no different. We've got lots of great ideas moving forward to make this even bigger and better, hopefully for next year. So, top tip: tune in next year.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've got to keep going now. We've got a couple of other items for you, but just a reminder now as we roll another VT about all the marvellous work that this charity does and why your funds are so important.
Hello and welcome to Airability. My name's Mike and I'm the Chief Executive of the charity. A very special charity that supports disabled people with all sorts of disability types through the magic and wonder of flight.
The feeling of being able to fly and once not being able to do it and now being able to do it is just amazing.
The one thing that's fantastic about Airability is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
Doesn't matter what disability you have, you can all be doing the same thing. I have Asperger's syndrome. It's just freedom pretty much in the airline.
They were geared up for my physical impairment. I was a bit unsure as to how they'd react to me saying I was registered blind, but the minute I mentioned it, they said, yeah, that's no problem.
I have to say a massive thank you to Airability because they turned my life around and they gave me that purpose back. They gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
We're here to support you, whatever your disability. So please do get in touch and we can help you get into the sky to experience the wonder and magic of flight.
Well, there you go. If that's not reason enough for you to support Airability, you know, I'm not sure what is. That's a really inspiring piece of film there. And there's a couple of people who featured on that film who are here today behind the scenes. And it's just lovely to see the Airability crew here getting involved, putting this show on for you at home. Now, of course, you can donate through armchairairshow.com. You can actually pledge however much you wish to Airability, or you can text donate 70490, as we said earlier on. Now, there's a project I haven't mentioned at Airability, which is the Zenair CH750. This is an ambitious project that Airability took on about 3 years ago to be the first aircraft built by disabled people with adaptations for disabled people to fly. We're on track. We're about a year away to get that aircraft into the air, and it's your donations going to help us to get this aircraft in the air flying people from Airability. Now, we also rely very much on our corporate supporters. Indeed, our very first corporate supporter was Brightly.
There you go. Thank you very much, Breitling, and some of my old chums there in the video we've got. So a few more shout-outs before we continue with the next part of the show. We've got a shout-out to Gordon, known as Ted Barrett, who's an ex-World War II from the RAF. He's the oldest CAA authorised pilot and engineer in the UK. That's from Roger Barrett. In fact, Gordon has just celebrated his 100th birthday. Not good weather, so he flew a passenger jet simulator on the day. So a very happy birthday to you, Gordon, and thank you for the message there, Roger. So that was the red arrows you saw in the Breitling video. Now, every display organiser's worst nightmare is the traffic jams caused by the red arrows closing the display. Of course, the team try and get as many displays as they can in the summer. So starting and ending a show is normally the best way to do that, to fit as many displays in as possible. We don't have traffic issues here at the Armchair Airshow. We have no traffic, we have no crowd. So we're going to finish with the world-famous red arrows. Well, we've reached the part of the show where it is time for the UK crowd's favourite. It is, of course, the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Red 1, Squad Leader Tom Bold, and Red 6, Squad Leader John Bond. Gentlemen, welcome to the Armchair Airshow. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. And it's such a privilege to be here to join you from sunny Greece behind us.
So, Tom, congratulations on getting the leadership of the team. That must be a real honour.
It's a huge honour and a huge privilege. It's been such a difficult and turbulent year last year. So the rest of the team, so Reds 2 to 9, were all frozen, and I was the only one that has swapped roles. So all the winter workup and everything has all been about me this year, and the rest of the team supporting that. And it's been great to get to this stage.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. A leader has changed, but the rest of the team has stayed the same. So how has that been from a wingman perspective, Bondy?
The guys on the wing have probably had to learn slightly different inputs, but you know, for us in the second half, we've been quite lucky that we've been able to keep the show the same, and then add our own extra manoeuvres during the extra time we have during winter training. So it's been reasonably transparent. You know, the show will be different as it is from every Red One. So. To look forward to in 2021.
Are there any new manoeuvres coming in?
Absolutely, and that's been the beauty of having the team freeze, is that we've been allowed to use this winter training. You know, some of the manoeuvres that we did in 2020 are sort of sacrosanct, and we've already worked those up. So it allowed us just to put some more of the advanced manoeuvres that maybe some teams who have a reduced winter training period don't sort of touch. So we did mirror flat in 2020, but we're able now to add the mirror roll. So hopefully we'll get some nice rolling days and full days in the summer to be able to show the mirror roll, which is a pretty unique event. It takes quite a lot of work-up time training for myself to fly the inverted barrel roll, and for 7, 8, and 9 to have the confidence that I can fly it properly and to be able to hang on, and also create another one that we've added this year called Boomerang, which I think the Red Arrows Twitter and Facebook sites announced the other day, which hopefully, again, in a nice British summer's day at the seaside when we've got 4,000 foot of clear airspace, we can add that in as well. And again, there's no real big looping manoeuvres for Jippo in the second half, so that adds just another dimension to the second half. And when the weather's not quite so nice, we've got the staple of carousel to do instead. So hopefully something different for everyone this summer.
Back to you, Tom. Now, you've taken over as Red One. Just if you can tell the audience, when you were in the team before and since you left, what have you been doing in the interim, in that intervening period?
Yeah, so I left the team at the end of 2017. I got promoted, went to RAF Valley and was teaching the next generation of fighter pilots. So I learned to fly the Hawk T2. It's another Hawk, but it's vastly different to the one we fly. So it's got all TV screens, it's all electric, and it is there to teach people how to be frontline fighter pilots, whether that be on the Typhoon or the Lightning. So I did that for 3 years, and then at the end of at the beginning of last year, I found out that I was successful in my application to come back as Red One, and then I came back during the end of the summer and then took over from Perty in October. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's great to finally be here.
What does it take to go from flying the T2, as you say, it's a vastly different aeroplane with the new role of its training these 4th and 5th generation fighter pilots. What does it take from being an instructor on that to then taking the helm and being at the front of a 9-ship Red Arrows display?
That's a good question. So the aircraft, the T1, as you're all aware, is just such a beautiful aircraft to fly. You get in it, it's all analog, but your hands, your eyes, everything just goes to the right place, and it's wonderful to fly. So coming back to that from the T2, which is all electric, it's got a HUD, it's got all the information you need. Coming back to that was actually pretty straightforward to learn to fly it. But then actually to learn the role as Red One, so I got a good handover from the previous Red One who tells you how to do things. But some of it is just another one of those ski jump moments where you just have to go and practice it yourself. And you start off at heights and work myself down as a singleton down to display heights, and then I start flying with the team. And normally in a normal year, I just start flying with 2 and 3 on my wings, so that actually we kind of figure it out together. This year, because the team were experienced, they were the experts in their role. Actually, the first sortie that I did with the team, I just bolted the whole of Enid on, and we just went for it. And fortunate for me, the guys actually got used to my voice, my input very quickly. So we were off and running right at the start, which is a wonderful place to be.
Now, what we're going to do now, gents, we've got some brilliant footage from on board various aircraft. Tom, we'll start with you. If you can talk us through what we're seeing now, please.
Yeah, so this is our arrival. So we're coming in from crowd rear, and this is Wall. This is the biggest shape that we fly. It's about 800 feet wide. And here I'm starting to pull into the loop. So we start this about 360 knots. I'm pulling to 3.5 G, and I'm calling them into 9 arrow, which is actually the narrowest positions that we fly. So they're going from a really wide position here to positions here, which are just about 6 feet apart. As we're cresting over the top, and now we're probably doing anywhere between 120, 140 knots, so it's reasonably slow. I'll start coming down the hill now. We'll start to twist the whole formation to the right as we do this. And all those aircraft, as you see, are hardly moving, but they're 6 feet apart from us. And now as we come back down the hill, the speed will start to build, the G will start to build again. And now the guys are experiencing anywhere from 3 to 3.5 G again as they twist the formation to the right.
And I think we've moved into a different manoeuvre now.
We have. So this is Hammer. So this is how we start the second half. So I'm coming in from crowd left. We're all, again, pretty close. And I'm pulling it to a quarter clover. So I'm pulling into the vertical. I'm twisting it now to the left with them all with us. Again, 6 feet apart. Slow speed over the top. And then as I come down, I should be right at the middle of show datum, show center, and then as we come down through, we're now just all 9 aircraft are just going to fan out into hopefully a nice, graceful arena filling spectacle to start the second half. And hopefully, I think we'll see some of the synchro stuff off this, which I will let Bondi talk about.
Yeah, I think this is going to continue. So, Bondi, over to you.
Once we come out the hammer, we enter something called the flat pattern. So essentially, myself and Seven between us are trying to date in where we are in relation to crowd centre. And depending on the wind, one of us will call a turn in, which essentially we initiate the turn towards the line, which is 230 metres away from the crowd. So you'll see here, this is Red's 9 and number 7. 9 saddled up behind 7. And the aim here is to pass both of us. We call it 4 lengths. So number 9 and 8 will be 4 lengths from 6 and 7 respectively. And we're aiming to pass in the middle and aim to make that fudge that makes it look like the aircraft are essentially going to hit each other.
That's brilliant. Right, we moved across to another bit of close formation now.
We do, yeah. So this is the diamond barrel roll. So actually this is videoed from Bondi's aircraft, but that's me that you can see at the front. So we're digging down to 300 feet here. We're pulling up, easing up, and then we're going to go straight into a barrel roll. And this is in our trademarked diamond shape. So as we're coming around here, all the guys in that diamond are just staring at my aircraft as we're cresting over the top, about 3,000 feet. Going to continue the roll going all the way down to the bottom, down to, again, around 500 feet, and then it will start the aircraft moving to the right afterwards.
Amazing. And I think we're going back to some more synchro footage now. So, Bondi, can you take over and talk us through the next bit?
Yeah, this is our barrel. So this is taken at Tanagra. We're here at 330 knots for an opposition pass towards each other. We're down at 100 feet here. We're closing in, and at an appropriate point, I'm going to call roll go. So just as we pass, I call the roll go. I'll put about 70 degrees angle of bank on the aeroplane, and then into a barrel roll. So essentially, you're looking for that photo where 2 aircraft are heading towards each other. They then turn away from each other, and you're looking for those great snaps that you see from many of the photographers at air shows, that the aircraft will just head on and they've just turned away from each other, and then enter a nice coloured smoke barrel roll.
Right, I'm going to give the last word to Tom. So a couple of last questions, Tom. What are you most looking forward to this summer?
Just getting back to displaying. The Red Arrows haven't displayed in front of the UK public for getting on for 2 years now. And personally, I haven't done it in over 3 years. It's what we do best. So I just can't wait to get in front of the public for that first time and actually, just show off what we do, put the red, white and blue on and actually, get to display all the hard work that we've put on to get the show where it is now. So yeah, for me, it's just getting back into that. Can't wait.
That's brilliant. And what is your favourite shape or manoeuvre in this year's display, Tom?
Oh, mine. Oh, yeah, it's the wall arrival. I think it's great. It is the widest shape that we do. It puts down lots of smoke, lots of noise, come from crowd rear, and then we pull up into that loop into 9 arrows. So yeah, it's got to be the arrival for me.
Bro, and I know there are a lot of people very, very excited to see it. Gents, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to see us. I noticed you're in red suits now, so you mentioned already you're coming home. That is public display approval granted. Huge congratulations on that this week. It's a great achievement, and certainly out the front there as Red One, Tom, a great accolade. So well done to you both. I wish you all the very best, and the rest of the team. I hope it's going to be a very safe, productive and busy summer. Bondi, wish you the best for the future, and gents, I can't wait to see you at a show and see what you can put in the air and also catch up on the ground. So thanks for coming on and supporting the Armchair Air Show.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
So good to talk to my old chums again, and they are now back in the UK, having carried out a fly past in Crete as an anniversary for the Battle of Crete, and then met up with the Croatian display team on the way home. But now back at Scampton, getting ready for their first display next weekend at Ragley Hall at the Midlands Air Festival. George.
Well, thanks, Mike, and we're all looking forward to the start of a proper season here in UK of full air displays. Still going to be tricky, but what have we done today? I cannot believe that 3 hours has passed so fast, and we have pushed the boundaries on behalf of Airability this afternoon in this magnificent hangar, courtesy of London Biggin Hill Airport, and so many friends and family behind me, you can see us. But first of all, there are a whole load of thanks. But if I could just start with my co-presenters this afternoon. Liz McConaughey, our roving reporter, has brought a new genre of humour to this charity, and we've enjoyed every minute of it. Liz, your comments, your favourite moments this afternoon.
Oh,
Oh, just thank you so much for inviting me along to help out. I've had an absolutely great time, and it's just so nice to meet so many new people and just hear about some amazing aircraft.
That's really, really good.
Next year.
Well, I think we're definitely going to see more of Liz in the coming years. But of course, the two of us have been, or the three of us together, including Mike and John, have been chums for many, many years. And we could go on for another 3 hours chatting aeroplanes, but it's the charity that brought us together. John, your favourite moments and your connections this afternoon.
Well, you know, it feels the perfect place to put on this show. Biggin Hill have been fantastic hosts to us. But I have to say, my highlight today was seeing Sophie go flying. Sophie's next to me. It's what we do. We've just had the opportunity to have a little peep into the daily life of Airability. And I have to say, 14.1 million people in this country are registered disabled. So we've just touched the surface. So there's so much more work that we can do.
And that's what we intend to do. You heard me chatting to Shona Bowman earlier on this afternoon about the future vision. And there's no doubt that this charity grows exponentially year on year on year. But of course, adding a touch of jet aviation class to this afternoon, our great friend Lingy over here, Mike Ling, 10 years with the Red Arrows. Mike, you're just living the dream. You still are. I hope you enjoyed this afternoon. What did you make of it?
Do you know what? Being at Biggin Hill, seeing a Spitfire display, that is hairs on the back of the neck stuff, and it was again today. So great to have this hybrid event, and hopefully we can do another one in the future.
We certainly will, and I hope with the help of all our sponsors that we've mentioned this afternoon and Biggin Hill, we hope to be back bigger, better, always pushing the boundaries on behalf of Airability. It is a team effort, and that's where we started out, and that's where we're going to finish this afternoon. I want to invite all my friends and colleagues from across the charity and our sponsors and all the helpers and volunteers this afternoon, but most of all to yourselves for tuning in, staying with us so long and supporting online. Keep the donations coming. The auction remains open until 9 o'clock tomorrow night. We need your support. Let's go on this journey together. But right now, it's the end of the Armchair Airshow 2021. We look forward to 2022. Goodbye from me, George Bacon, and my fellow presenters, but mostly the team that makes it happen, Airability. Goodbye, everybody.